Shannon Miller, Dominique Dawes, Carrie Strug, they're going to go again. And they're already world class. I mean, they're already Olympic level. And I'm like, well, there's 3 spots
Of the
right
7.
there. There's 3 spots right there. So there's 4 left, 4 spots left.
Welcome to the Stick the Landing podcast, brought to you by Iron Business Solutions. We've got stories to tell and solutions to deliver for your business. Today, my guest is former USA Women's National Team Coordinator, Colorado Aerials Gymnastics Club owner, businessman extraordinaire, and my friend, Tom Forrester. Tom, how are you? And how was your long flight in the Greyhound of the Skies, Southwest Airlines?
Good. Glad to be here. It's an honor. Thanks, Ken, for having me. Man, this summer's just been weather-wise. It's a bumpy flight coming in. I was kind of hoping for really warm weather today in Nashville, but it's not.
And it was bizarre. It was 80 degrees the day before you guys got here. Your wife told me you guys brought Colorado weather with
Yeah,
you, so.
Sadly. We were hoping we wouldn't, but we did.
All right, confession time, buddy. 25 years ago, I founded what is now the new State Board of Tennessee. And I was young and eager to make Tennessee good at gymnastics. And so I said, hey, let's have a state clinic so we can elevate the level of gymnastics in Tennessee. And I reached out to my good buddy, Milan Stanovich, who was at the University of Florida as an assistant coach at the time, and said, hey, would you come in and be a clinician for these coaches? And he said, I can't. I'm recruiting that weekend. But my good friend, Tom Forrester, would love to do it. And I said, great, give me his number. So I reached out to you, as you know, and said, hey, we're doing this state clinic, and my vision for this state clinic is we're going to have guest lecturers on all the events, and all the coaches are going to be there, and there'll be a few high-level select athletes at your disposal for this thing. And you say, great, this is right up my alley, this is what I want to do, blah, blah, blah. Well, we get less than 2 weeks out from this clinic, and another member of the board, and I'm not going to say his name, just bullies his way into taking this thing over and says, what we really need to do is make a bunch of money for the state and make all the kids good and invite the kids to this clinic. And there was no stopping this man when he picked up this momentum on this thing. And I had to pick you up from the airport where you already came prepared with terrific lectures for the coaches. We were all going to get better, and as a result, our athletes would get better.
I remember that.
And I have to say, hey, surprise, Tom, terms of the clinic have changed. You're still the bars clinician, but now I have 300 12-year-old level 4s that you got a spot on a KIP.
I remember that too.
Oh, my gosh. It was awful. It was the most embarrassing gymnastics moment I've ever had. But it's not even the funniest part of this story. The same gentleman that took over the clinic that you had to spot all these 12-year-olds on KIPs, sorry again, appointed himself the vault clinician, which was mildly okay. He did have some good vaulters. He had some good things to say. But for whatever reason, the group he had that morning wasn't understanding what he wanted them to do. And so he took it upon himself to demonstrate. Keep in mind, he's in his mid-40s and significantly overweight. I wouldn't say obese, but he's overweight. And so he tears off down the runway and punches the springboard. And when he does, 2 things exploded. The first was the springboard. And when I say exploded, I mean exploded. Tom, springs came out the side. Pieces of wood were fractured. Wow. And the second thing was his knee.
Ooh.
And he had to be taken to the hospital via ambulance. It was so bad. Still not at the funniest part of this story, which is embarrassing. I don't know why I'm admitting it, but it's funny, so we'll tell the story. That night, after I drop you off at your hotel, probably with sore shoulders and cursing the name Ken Harris and the state of Tennessee forever, we were scheduled to have our annual state meeting where all the coaches got to sit in and hear the board present the budget and what's going on and blah, blah, blah. And so the coach that blew up his knee and took over the clinic gets out of the hospital in time to come to the meeting, and he's on crutches and a big old brace on his leg. And he and another coach get into such a heated debate over something trivial that they decide the best way to solve this is a fist fight in the parking lot, and I am not kidding you.
Wow.
And by the way, at this point, I don't know, I'm 28 or 29 years old, and I go, this seems good to me. Let's go. I want to see a guy with a blown up knee get punched in the face, especially for what he made me have to tell Tom Forster he had to do. So I'm egging this thing on. I'm like, yeah, let's go. Thankfully, there were enough women at this state meeting who had cooler heads and didn't want to see a fight, prevented them from, because these two literally, the one guy was walking toward the door and the other guy was on his crutches hobbling behind him.
Yeah.
They were going to seriously go outside and fight in the parking lot over whatever this was. So anyway, Tom, here's your formal apology. I've spent the last 24 years trying to avoid you or wear like a fake mustache or something so that you wouldn't know who I was. I'm sorry. And more bad news. There are 300 level 4s in the next room, all needing a spot on a kip.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. I'm putting my foot down on that one.
All right. So you came in with Lori. Did you guys get to squeeze in any touristy Nashville stuff, or have you ever done touristy Nashville stuff in the past?
Yeah. Wait, is Opryland, is that in Nashville?
Yeah. And that's
Opryland.
touristy and locally, man. I love that place.
Yeah. And I know we've been to Nashville a number of times. We love it.
Cool. And you got to have breakfast with a good friend of yours that we're going to talk about later in the show today.
Yeah.
One of my former athletes, whom I probably owe a bunch of apologies to, because again,
you were a young coach then.
Yeah, and I've learned, and I'm better, and if I had to do it all again, it would be better. But sorry. All right. As will become the habit on this show, as this is only episode 2, but as will become the habit, I'm going to try to go through like a short biography of each one of my guests. So let's start with you. Tell us how you first got involved at gymnastics at all. Tell us about like little Tom. Did he do gymnastics, and where did you grow up? And just go to it. I know you got stories to tell us.
All right. My dad was in the Air Force, and really, really smart guy. So we had a master's and a doctorate, and he was also a pilot. But because of his education, we were able to grow up in Colorado Springs mostly because he was taught aeronautical engineering at the Air Force Academy. But when I was 9, he got shipped to Vietnam as a pilot. And I have 2 sisters, and my mom, desperately wanted me to get involved with things. So she started registering me for baseball and football. And, I'm little, and I was not good at those sports. And back in those days, if you weren't good, you didn't play. So, so it wasn't much fun. And I remember one day I happened to walk to school early. I was 9, and I saw kids going into the school, but the school wasn't open yet. So I followed them, and they went into the gym, and I was kind of peering through the windows, and there was 2 rows of mats, and they were tumbling on these mats. And I watched, and the PE teacher saw me.
And you were how old about?
I was 9.
9. Okay.
And
by the way, viewers who are non-gymnastics people, 9 is considered nowadays a very late start.
Yeah, late start.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Late start, for sure. And so the PE teacher saw me peering in, and he just waved me in and said, come in and kick your shoes off and, join in. So I was really watching, and some kid ran down, did a front flip onto a mat, and that was the coolest thing I ever saw. So I watched, and I went in line and ran down, did a front flip.
Awesome.
And landed, I think, on my feet and my rear end, but I was like, wow, this is so cool. And the PE teacher saw me do that, and he immediately said, hey, we got a little tumbling team. I'd like for you to start participating.
Yeah, right.
I'm like, yes, sir. So that was my introduction. And luckily at that time in Colorado Springs, actually in all of Colorado, they had really, really great programs in the school systems. We had a varsity team at junior high and high schools all through the state.
This was same for me. I grew up in Chicago.
Yeah.
And I was on my junior high,
Mm.
my varsity junior high team when I was in the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And on my varsity high school team, sophomore, junior, and senior season, and just on the freshman team when I was a freshman.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. There's Colorado is one of those states like Illinois, California, Pennsylvania, Ohio that had really, really strong school system gymnastics. So, I made the gymnastics team right away. And back then, you got to hang out with the jocks and the cool kids because gymnastics was respected. I mean,
Yeah.
our school was quite good in Colorado Springs. We had great coaches. And so I thought, this is my new identity. And
Mm.
as a little guy, I'm getting recognized for this sport. And so I'm hanging out with the cool kids. And I thought, man, I'm a gymnast. That's what I do. And I wrestled a little bit, as well. But man, gymnastics it was so much fun. And I realized there's no end to it. When you master something, you can add a twist or change the shape, which that intrigued me. And I really liked being an individual sport. I wasn't really a team sport
Mm.
guy. I liked being responsible for my own success. And if I fail, that's on me and I'm okay with it.
You're listening to Stick the Landing podcast by Iron Business Solutions. How would you like to have Tom Forrester or Mary Lee Tracy for one-on-one private sessions as your team mentor? Check out the Iron Business Solutions Gold Medal Team Package on the web for more information. Link in the description. My daughter is the same way. In high school, she did track and loved it because she didn't have to count on anybody else.
Yeah.
She was a two-time state high jump champion. And she played volleyball indoor and was an absolute superstar in the sport, but hated when a teammate would make a mistake.
Yeah.
And so now she plays
Yeah.
outdoor, and she'll tell you to your face, the reason I like beach volleyball better is because there's only one person I have to
Another
count on
person.
instead of 5 other.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, so for me, I was that kind of athlete. But so I was doing really well. And then I was 16. My gymnastics took a bad turn. I
Yeah,
fell and
tell
broke
us about it.
Yeah. I fell in my backyard and broke my hip. And
What were you doing in your backyard that you just stumbled?
yeah, oddly, I was helping put the furniture away because it was raining, which was unusual because I wasn't a kid that helped out around the house very much.
That'll teach you.
But I thought, I'm going to help out my parents and I'm going to put the furniture away. And I stepped over this puddle and slipped and fell in the splits and broke my hip.
Oh, man.
And so they x-ray at the hospital revealed there was something wrong with my hip. And they didn't tell me what it was, but they told my parents, we think he has bone cancer. It looks like he has a tumor that's eating this bone away.
But nobody would tell you.
No,
Yeah.
they did not tell me. So they said, hey, take him home. And over the weekend, it may be his last weekend at home. Possibly. I mean, they just didn't know, right? They just didn't know. And so, as a family, we went out to dinner and we went to the movies and I was on crutches.
And you're like, this is great. I'm going to break my hip next week.
And as long as I, didn't move very fast, it didn't hurt. But if I moved too fast, it really hurt. So I was like, why don't they just cast me and I just start healing? And they said, well, it's more complicated than that. So I ended up going to Denver to an Army hospital up there. It's 1975 and Vietnam War's, getting over. And they have a great orthopedic doctor system up there because there's so many vets and soldiers. And so I'm on the 5th floor of Fitzsimmons Army Hospital on this, literally it's like a football field full of beds. And I'm 16. It was misery. And they're not really telling me what's going on. And I'm there for a couple of weeks while they're doing tests, trying to determine what plan of action they're going to take. And I'm just getting kind of angrier and angrier.
I can't imagine.
And frustrated. And so to back up just a little bit, 2 years earlier, I was 14. I had confessed to my father that I was an atheist. And we went to church as a family.
And tell everybody the quote.
Oh, yeah,
What
so,
your dad said. This
and
is
I was
brilliant.
nervous. Yeah, I was nervous to tell him because he was, disciplinarian guy. And
But what a wise man.
yeah. And so he said, well, he didn't get mad at me. And he said, well, I think there comes a point in every person's life when they seek something greater than themselves. And I did not know what that meant at
So
age
powerful.
14.
Yeah.
But I thought, oh, okay.
But you knew it was potent enough that you stored it
Yeah.
in your heart. Like to this day,
Yeah.
you
Remembered
can
it?
recite that. Yeah.
Yep. And so after 2 weeks in the hospital, I was just angry and kind of yelling at people and so forth. And this guy who was in the bed across from me.
You're 16 years old yelling at people.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to laugh because I
Yeah.
know you were miserable, but just that image is it's
just-
hilarious.
Yeah, I hated everything about it. And this guy wheels himself over to me because I asking him questions, and he shared with me one afternoon about having a relationship with Jesus, and I remember just not saying a thing, just kind of listening, just whatever. Never said anything, and he wheeled himself back. And later that night, that quote of my dad's came up to me
2 years later.
2 years later.
Yeah.
And I thought, man, that happened fast. And here I am. The doctors aren't sure if they can help me. My parents can't help me. I can't help me. I guess I'm at that point. And so I thought, well, I guess I'm going to believe in you, God. I guess if there's a God, I'm going to believe in you. And I remember there was this voice inside my head that said, if you do this, you will never be the same. You cannot be the same guy you've been. Are you sure you want to do this? And I did it. So I didn't know what to say. I just said, God, I'm going to believe in you. And, if I die, I guess, whatever. I didn't know. And but I woke up the next morning just
isn't it
feeling
cool?
confident.
Like as a fellow Christian, isn't it cool that that we serve a God that knows our heart, right?
Yeah.
And so you didn't have to pray a formal prayer with specific words to invite him. What the Lord knew at the time was the sincerity with which you said, and I don't sound silly to say with sincerity, well, Lord, I guess I'll believe in you.
Yeah.
But he knew.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then he dwelt within you. Awesome.
Yeah. And best decision I ever made. And so my mom came
Would
to
you
visit.
say agreeing to come on this podcast was at least top 3, maybe top 5?
No. No. Well, we'll see how it turns out.
All right, fair.
But so I told my mom, I said, hey, I think I'm going to walk out of the hospital. And she started crying. And that's when she told me.
Because at
really,
that point, you
well,
didn't know.
I didn't know. And so they, were telling her, hey, be prepared. He may lose his leg. We may not be able to save this. But they determined it wasn't cancerous, and they found out it was what they called an aneurysm bone cyst. It was the largest on record in history at that time, 1975. And they said, we're going to try to do a bone graft. It will end up being the largest natural bone graft ever attempted with bones from cadavers, not mine, because they couldn't take it from me. And they said, most likely his body's not going to accept it. It's going to reject it.
Yeah, and this
try
was
it.
before we had artificial hips or artificial knees. Yep.
Right.
So, yep.
Yeah. And so I just remember saying, well, do it right. Do it right the first time, because I don't want to come back here. I don't want to
Yeah.
do this anymore. I got gymnastics to do. And they said, no, you're never going to do gymnastics again. You won't be doing it. I said, yes, I am. I know I'm going to do gymnastics. And they said no. So anyway, I ended up really healing miraculously quickly. I did walk out of the hospital in a body cast with crutches, which I kind of thought I'd walk out on my own, but still walked out. So that was great. And got the cast off before the new year. That was in September when I broke it. And did gymnastics a little bit that season in the spring with no dismounts. And after I qualified to state on the rings, they released me to do gymnastics. And but they said you'll never vault. Your hip will never take that kind of pounding. But anyway, a year later, I won the state championship in the all-around and got a scholarship to Penn State. And, I ended up becoming an All-American on the vault.
All right.
Of all things.
Of all things.
Yeah, of
all right,
things.
Penn State. I'm going to interrupt. I'm going to do that all day. You and I have some mutual friends, and I reached out to one of our mutual friends, Heidi Anderson at the time, Stanovich now,
Yes.
who was at Penn State the same time you were, or overlapped a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I think she was actually only there a year. But
Yeah. She was a freshman my senior year. Yeah.
Yep. And so I said, hey, Heidi, Tom's coming on the podcast. I need some dirt on this guy that I can bring up in the podcast. And I'm going to read you the direct quote she said to me.
Oh, no.
She said, yeah, he was a junior or a senior, and I was a freshman. My freshman year, the men's gymnastics team had some big parties, and they were pretty wild. So far, so good? True?
Yeah. That's
Okay.
true.
She then goes on to say, I and my freshman teammates were also pretty wild.
That would be true.
Yeah. Stay tuned for this next part, because she then goes on to say, Tom was a stable, mature Christian guy, and we probably drove him crazy with our immaturity. So I got no dirt on you from her. But do you have some dirt on her for me? Because she's in a perpetual, she said that she probably annoyed you. And what I like to say is I'm in a perpetual state of annoyance with Heidi. So anything for us on her?
The only thing I remember is she talked incessantly and
Still
was
the same.
very confident and vocal about her opinions, which caused a lot of conflict, I think, between her and her coach, Marshall Lavner at the time. And so it just kind of, because the men and women's team, we trained together, and it seems like she was always in trouble.
Yeah. Well, she's the same person. She never outgrew that. So she's married to our other good friend, Milan Stanovich. And when he heard that I reached out, he called me first to tease me because he was the guy that gave me your number. And anytime you come up in conversation, he teases me about the time I made you spot those 300 level 4s on kips. And then to say, hey, I might have a little dirt on this guy that you can bring up. So he told me that I should ask you about some national camps and Muriel Grossfeld. Something about how dare you?
Oh, I think what he is referring to is back in the really early 90s, they had started a camp system for what back then they called it Junior B. And it was like a level pre-elite. And the rules were different and so forth.
So
and
similar to what Hopes is now.
Kind of like what Hopes are. And now, of course, there's an elite development camp, right? And so this was kind of the precursor to that kind of concept. And we had an athlete, her name was Kim Young, that qualified to that camp. And we went, and Muriel Grossfeld is one of the staff people. I met Tammy Biggs, Gary Anderson, Christy Kraft, Steve Elliott, and they were the staff people at each event. And we were told that at the end of the camp, they would send us like a survey kind of what they wanted us to be working on. So the next time we come in a month, we would, be better prepared. Well, the survey never came. We never got a report from them. And the next month came, and in the evening, they had a meeting, and Muriel really kind of starts chewing us out for not being better prepared and not doing this and not doing that. And I thought at first, well,
for reference, listeners, Muriel Grossfeld is somebody I referred to in the previous podcast with Mary Lee as being about this tall, weighing about 85 pounds, and being one of the toughest, hardest people on the planet. If I was in a bar fight and Muriel Grossfeld was part of it, I'd be praying to God she was on my team and not the other team. So,
see, my view of her she was one of the brightest minds. She analyzed movement so well. She and Tammy Biggs, and she and both Muriel and Tammy, great mentors to me, these women, because they thought so analytically about movement.
Well, that's because you're so smart. You were never intimidated by. I was intimidated by little old Muriel the whole time. All right, carry on. So you're at this thing. They didn't send you the report cards.
Yeah. So I think I interrupted her, and I said, "Wait a minute." Yeah. And I looked around to the rest of the room.
Did you say, "Wait a minute"? Because the quote I got was, "How dare you?"
Well, that might have been it. Yeah, that seems rude to bring up, but yeah, I think I did say that, and because I was offended that we're getting chewed out for something they didn't follow through with.
Yeah, totally fair.
Yeah, and I just confronted them and said, and asked all the other coaches, "Did you guys get a report as to what we're supposed to do?" Because I didn't. So I worked on what I thought was important based on what you guys told us the last time, and you didn't do any of those things today, so that's not my fault. And that was my introduction to Muriel.
And afterwards, Muriel loved you.
She did.
She changed her tune.
She did. She
was
totally
like, "Hey,
did.
you're right," and whatever. And so maybe if I'd have heard that story 25 years ago, I could have done the same thing. And Muriel and I, honestly, we always got along and whatever. But she was an intimidating figure because she was hyper intelligent, hyper qualified, and because she smoked about 80 cigarettes a day
and a lot of gin and tonics. Yeah, she was. I loved her. She just really, really helped me as a coach.
All right, let's get back to Penn State. You tell us a little bit about your experience on the Penn State team, because you were on there in the 80s when men's gymnastics in the United States was sort of at its pinnacle. And Mary Lee and I talked about this, that 80, we should have won gold, but we boycotted.
Right.
And 84, we did win gold, but the Russians boycotted. But we were stacked as a team, and it was a super popular sport for men. And Penn State was one of the premier men's gymnastics programs.
Yeah, we were among them. We were
not
really
the,
good.
but one of them.
Yeah, we were among them, and we were a really good, solid team. And I was of age. I wanted to try to make the 80 Olympic team, and that was a goal of mine as an athlete. And by the time I'm halfway through my freshman year at Penn State, I realized, it's 1979. No, 78. And I thought, I'm too far behind. I'm just not going to make it. So I had enough self-realization to know, that dream's not going to happen. And, but, we would make it to nationals as a team. And so I still was going to try to make the Olympics in 1980, which I did not even get the score to USA Championships, so I didn't get to the trials. But man, I loved it. And if somebody said, would I do it again? I would, even knowing the result. The relationships I made and the things that I learned was just awesome. But I did make a goal of saying, well, I want to become an All-American, even if Penn State doesn't get to nationals, which means you've got to win an event at your region to get to nationals. So that became a secondary goal for me, which I ended up accomplishing in 1980 on the vault.
Yeah, congratulations. And to revisit 5 minutes ago on vault, where doctors said you'll never do that again.
I wish I could have talked those doctors, said, could you tell me I would never make the Olympic team? Because then I know I would have made it. But yeah.
And you were team captain?
I ended up being voted team captain, yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. That's pretty great. Let's move forward a little bit to you getting into coaching. Tell us about what your major was in college. And did you know all the time in college, hey, what I want to do for a living is coach? Or did you have sort of an epiphany the way I did a couple of years into college? Hey, I was born to be a coach. Talk to us about
No, I went to college knowing I wanted to be a coach. So I got a degree in health and physical education and a minor in science. And what I envisioned my life to be is I would go back into Colorado Springs and end up being an assistant coach at my high school. And then when my coach retired, I would take over that boys program. And, that was kind of how I saw it. And I really wanted to be a teacher. My mom's a teacher. My father's a professor at the Air Force Academy. So teaching is in our blood, and I loved it. And the high school coach that I had, his name is Harold Metz, was such a mentor to me. He inspired me. So I wanted to be like Harold. I wanted to be able to pay it forward. And that's what I wanted to do. And then I took a physics class at Penn State because I hated chemistry and I avoided that. And man, I just loved learning about laws of motion and the science behind movement and motion. And it helped me as a gymnast.
Yeah.
I remember that really helping me. And I started looking at movement very differently at that point once I took that physics class. And so it just kind of inspired me more about how to be a better coach, someday. And so my first coaching experience was at Woodward Gymnastics Camps in the summer.
And did you
coaching boys?
Okay, so
coaching boys.
That's going to bring about the next question, because you said, hey, your vision was to go home and be your high school boys team coach. Yep. And here you are, a celebrated women's coach. How did you get into coaching? Did two coaches have a fist fight on the gym floor like they did for me, or what happened?
So by the time I went back to graduated, I got married. My wife Lori is also from Colorado Springs, so we went back home to raise our families, and the high schools had dropped the programs.
Oh.
They just
that
all
rapidly.
Of them, they were gone. And clubs had started to pop up, which there weren't in existence when I left, but there were a couple little clubs. And being at Woodward Gymnastics, I would hear of club stories from other coaches from around the country, and they didn't sound good. I mean, the clubs, it just sounded like, wow, there's a lot of drama in gymnastics clubs,
Hmm.
and never having been to one. But so that's what transpired. So I was like, well, I guess, that's not going to happen. And it was 1981, and there were no teaching jobs. So I started as a substitute teacher. I put my name in so I could be a substitute. And I started working as a painter for my father-in-law. I cleaned my dad's office buildings, bathrooms. I was doing anything I could to uh, make money. And Lori was pregnant, so we have our first little boy, little child coming on the way. Didn't feel very good about myself
Hmm.
for a year, basically unemployed, doing odd jobs, trying to survive. And one day I get a phone call from Lori's uncle, who happened to be a principal at an elementary school. And he said that the PE teacher was sick, and would I like to take the job for 30 days? I said, absolutely, I'll do that. 10 minutes later, literally 10 minutes, the phone rings again. And it's this guy I'd never heard of who got my number and said, hey, I heard that you and Lori, would, have gymnastics background. I have this little gymnastics club that I really don't want anymore, and I'm looking for managers for it. And all I remember saying is, how much? Because I was like, oh, a gymnastics club, I don't know. So like, well, how much you going to pay? Because we're broke, right?
Yeah.
So he lied. He gave me a number and he didn't pay me that. But anyway, the teaching job turned into full time. The woman ended up retiring, so I got the job permanently and got tenured as a teacher. And the guy who owned the gymnastics club never came. So Lori and I were able to teach the few students that were there kind of anything that we wanted, which was fun to kind of be your own boss. I'd never experienced that before. And I was enjoying that. And one day he said, well, I'm going to sell it. I'm done. I'm going to, and I knew the person who was going to buy it. And I was like, "Ugh, I can't work for that person.
Hmm.
So I told my dad, I'm not going to be able to do that anymore." And my dad had the idea. He goes, well, find out what he wants for it. Do you think you can make it work? And I said, I think I can. I think we can make this work. And the guy wanted $10,000. And it wasn't worth it. It was $10,000, and I didn't have anything. But my dad said, "Well, I can get a loan for that." So my dad said, "Hey, well, I'll get the loan. Every 6 months, you make the loan payment. I'll give you 10% of the company till you own it." And that's how we got started.
Wow.
Yeah.
1983. All right. So 1983, Ariels is sort of born under yours and Lori's leadership. What would you say was your primary focus in the beginning? I mean, did you immediately say, I want to have the best high level athletes I can, and in that, did you say girls or did you say boys? And then um, did you go, hey, no, what I want is I want to get rich owning a gymnastics club.
We literally had 35 students. That's all there was.
Weren't going to get rich.
No. And there was one boy. I remember his name, Aaron Tabucci, 5 years old. One boy. And he was in a preschool class. So, I'm teaching. We didn't have any advanced students at all. And so all my thought was, it's fun to do. If we can make this work, it'll be a nice side income for us. And that was my aspirations.
So you were
really not
still
more than that.
full-time teaching PE.
Yeah.
And teaching these 35 kids, and you didn't have any sort of like aspirations to be any sort of elite coach or
No.
anything like that. Just
No.
enjoying the little side hustle.
Yeah, because I was really hoping to somehow get boys or something, and that just I didn't know how to do it, didn't know how to advertise. I didn't know anything about business, nothing. And so we weren't making it. We were going to go bankrupt. It was pretty clear we weren't going to make it, and I'm kind of getting prepared for that. And then 1984 came, and the Olympics came to Los Angeles, and little Mary Lou Retton won the all-around and smiled and giggled, and our phones for the next 90 days would not stop ringing. And that was it. Our club turned the corner. In 90 days, we had 250 students.
And wow. And if it was like that for you, it was like that for everyone.
Everybody. Honestly, Ken, gymnastics overnight became an industry in our country where it became a culturally expected thing your son or daughter is going to take gymnastics is they may play soccer, they may play t-ball, and they're going to learn to swim, and they're going to take gymnastics.
Yeah.
And yeah, that changed everything. Um, but still, we had hardly any boys, so it was pretty obvious I'm becoming a girls' coach is what happened. And they learned fast, and they're respectful, and I
Yeah.
liked it, and so that's what happened.
Yeah, I always say the when girls are, let's say, 5 to 12-ish, and for some of them it's later, and some of them it's earlier. They're so easy to work with because you say, okay, it's time to go to bars, and they're all running to bars and they're excited and they're going to do whatever you say whenever you say it. And boys, when they're that age, 5 to 12, 14, maybe like that, they're hard to coach because they can't focus for 4.5 seconds. But there's this thing that switches at about the same age where boys kind of figure out, you know what, I'm here for a reason, and the reason is to get good at gymnastics, and this guy can help me. I'm gonna do what he says.
Yeah.
And they become chill and ready to work, and they're still different than girls. And at that same time, girls realize this guy can't make me do anything. He can literally say, climb the rope or I'll shoot you. And I can tell him, pull the trigger. And they figure it out. And and when I talk to young coaches about this, I say some girls, that window stays open for a while. And it's just rough.
Yeah.
And some girls, it closes quickly, but sooner or later the window does close. And the girls have the same realization that the boys do. And they go, hey, I'm here for a reason, and this guy can help me to that. So, yeah. Anyway, I diverge from the topic. But, all right. So you start running the business now, and it's 250 kids. It's profitable. Yep. Are you able to quit full-time PE?
Well, our test was, can we make it through the summer months without tapping into my teaching money? And we couldn't.
Oh.
We couldn't. And so I was like, dang it, this is after 5 years. We couldn't do it. And, but I went to, in the fall of what I think, 1989, we had a teacher conference, and they brought in this motivational speaker who talked about, you got to do what you love. And I thought, he's right. And what I love is trying to make aerial gymnastics work. And at the end of that little meeting, I followed the principal into the office, and I said, I'm going to quit. It was mid-year. Wow. I said, I really want to try to make this work. Now, his daughter actually was in our gymnastics program. And he's like, well, why don't you do this? Apply for a sabbatical. So that way I hold your job for a year, and if it doesn't work, I'll give you your job back. And I said, okay, I'll do that.
Yeah.
And I went home, told Lori, I remember it to this day, she's doing dishes, and I come home, and I'm like, well, I quit today.
You guys have both kids at this point?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And we had already talked about that we probably can't quit because and she paused momentarily. She looked at me and she goes, well, you get all my preschool classes, and went right back to doing the dishes. And, but you know what? In a year's time, we super successful. I made more money that particular year than I would have in 4 more years as a teacher.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was just being able to devote 100% of our time to it.
Yeah.
It was really an exciting time.
So it went from a side hustle to my hustle.
Yeah.
Okay. And then at what point did you then say to yourself, hey, as long as I'm coaching gymnastics here, I might as well try to coach this to the highest possible level? That
was 1988. An elite qualifier.
And that was, at this point, Aerials was already financially. No, that was 89. Yeah. Okay. All right.
We weren't there yet.
So you were still doing it as a side hustle, and you said, I want to figure this out. Okay.
Because, we had a little level, back then they called it class 3, class 4. No, not class 4, class 5. And we had just won the class 5 state championship. And I saw this, I volunteered to be a timer at the elite
And back
qualifier.
then, I was only a part of that for a tiny fraction of time. As I recall, the lower the level, the higher the athlete. Is that correct? So class 1 was the best.
Class 1 would be level 10 today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So class 5 would be like level 4, really. And I watched these guys, and Bella Caroli was there, and my friend Steve Nuno, who I competed against in college, and it was just really fun to see that level of gymnastics. And as an athlete, I missed it. I missed that part of the athlete that I was, and I was like, man, I'd like to coach athletes at that level. And so that became a goal. Like, how good of a coach can I be?
Hmm.
Am I good enough to do that? That's what I'm going to try to do. So that became the focus. And I joined the United States Elite Coaches Association.
Yeah.
That was the first organization that I was aware
I
of.
did too, so
Yeah.
I could start ordering those
Videos.
VCR
Yeah. The
videos
big
so I could watch them.
VHS tapes,
Yep.
that was a big deal.
You got the newsletter that somebody printed on their dot matrix and
Yeah.
stapled together and sent it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I did too.
And so I would, put the kids to bed at night, and then I'd go slap some videos into our VHS player and just watch and take notes. And I started noticing trends of techniques that all the best people were starting to look the same. And you remember how grainy they were?
Yeah, of course.
So it was really hard to tell, where's this athlete from? Couldn't really tell. But I started watching and noticing the really good kids all look alike.
Hmm.
And so I spent more money to get that freeze frame, that slow motion, because that cost more money, if you remember, to get that kind of video player.
I didn't have that kind of money.
Yeah,
I was still
spent the
employed
money.
by somebody else.
Yeah, I got the money for that. And I started analyzing things frame by frame, and I started seeing trends of what techniques were happening. And so there weren't development camps, there weren't national team camps at that time. So that's how you had to learn.
Yeah.
You had to figure it out.
All right. So let's jump from 88 forward to, let's say, early 90s. You had a trio of young elites. You had Donnie Thompson, Teresa Kulikowski, and Christy Powell.
Yep.
So let's start with Donnie. And let's start with her as a junior in 92. Because as a junior, she won the Classic in Knoxville, right?
Right.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about that. And that had to be, in my estimation, sort of a breakout moment for Tom Forster, Lori Forster, and Ariel's gymnastics. Because you guys arrived. Not only did you qualify a kid, but she won the meet.
Yeah. So I don't... we knew she was special. Donnie was special. We knew that. And so we got her when she was 7 years old. And so we had a plan of she was going to be of age for the 96 Olympics. So we had to put together a plan. And, but I think our breakout meet was not that meet, but
Okay. Tell me.
the 94 U.S. Olympic Festival was in St. Louis, Missouri, and it was filmed on CBS.
Okay, can I pause you? Because we have some cool things to cover that happened in 92 and 93 before we get to 94.
Okay. Well, I mean, she's winning. I mean, and she got international assignments.
It wasn't a breakout. Okay, all right, that's fine.
I didn't think so.
Okay, that's
I
fair.
didn't think so. But we definitely knew, we're on the scene now.
Yeah.
We've got one of the better juniors in the country. And so we're
just know
excited.
that if I would have taken Annabelle as a junior to the championships and she won, I would have been popping my suspenders and going, I've made it, I've arrived. This is a breakout meet for me. But maybe that's why I only achieved this level and you've achieved that.
No.
It might make sense. All right. So Donnie had a spectacular junior career.
She did.
Right? That in 1992 through and including 1994, at any American Classic, U.S. Classic, or national championships, she was in the top 5 every time. And most of the time, she was first or second at any of those meets.
Well, I don't recall exactly, but yeah, she was absolutely up
You
there.
just have to
and
trust my research.
Almost always winning bars. I mean, she was almost undefeated on bars. And competed internationally in Mexico and Canada and Italy. This is all up through 94. And then also Bulgaria. And then Christy Powell came to us from Cyprus Gymnastics. And Teresa Kulikowski came to us from
Karolyi's?
Well, Christy was at Caroli's
That's right.
first, and then went to Cypress, and then came to Colorado Springs.
And Cypress, that was Jim.
Yeah, in Texas.
Yeah.
Cypress Gymnastics Academy. And
No, I meant wasn't that Jim and Cheryl's?
no, that was Debbie Kychek was coaching him.
That's right.
Mhm.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. All right. So you sort of spoiled this a little bit for us already because you told us, hey, we already were thinking we had a plan. And for the people that don't know Tom personally, this is one of the most calculating, analytical human beings I have ever met. And I mean that as a compliment. No, it really is. I admire that a great deal. I remember when we had kids in Devo and you were giving lectures, you would just bring out your notebook of the stats that you compiled about internationally. Hey, right now, this percentage of kids are doing free hips. This percentage of kids are doing toe hands and whatever. And it's clear the direction of these things. So I was going to ask, hey, you guys were 4, 5, 6 years out. Were you already doing the math and going, I got to beat this many kids that are already there, and this is going to be our plan? Tell us.
Well, I didn't. I wasn't really calculating what kids we had to beat. What I was watching, what I noticed was the trends of history was the athletes in the 88 Olympics were doing more difficult things than they were in 84. And the athletes in 92 were clearly going to be doing more than what was being done in 88. So you could see whatever is going to happen in 96, what they're doing in 92 won't be enough. The other thing I noticed is 85% of the Olympic team were on the world championship team the year prior.
So, again, for our listeners, he's not throwing this out. You know, some people say, well, 90% of the time, and they're just throwing out 90% of the time. When Tom says 85%, he literally took
85%.
the actual number and divided by the people who made the Olympics, and there we go. We got 85%.
Yeah. One year it was 100%, but that was in the 2000s. But so I knew then, okay, an athlete has to be on the 95 world team. It's going to be in Sabai, Japan. We got to make that.
So you began plotting.
Yep. What are the routines we believe, what skills she's going to have to be competitive? And back then, it was the last Olympics for the compulsories. So we have 8 routines to train. And the compulsories had nothing to do with the optional. So it was a really distraction, really, of trying to get optional skills. But I also knew from being a competitive gymnast, when you first do these difficult routines, you struggle a bit. And so, which means we have to have these routines in 1994.
You have to have 1996 caliber routines
in
1994.
Because you're going to make mistakes. And we got to get through that season of mistakes. So we show up in 95 really being competitive, proving we can represent the country in 96.
Okay,
that was the plan.
So 94, you've made all these calculations, right?
Yep.
And you were about to tell us about the breakout meet in 1994.
It was the U.S. Olympic Festival, and a lot of the top gymnasts were there, and Donnie and Christy took first and second.
Wow.
And it was televised.
And these were, they were still juniors at this point?
Juniors,
Okay,
juniors. And there was Amy Chow and Amanda Borden and J.C. Phelps, and I mean, it was a stacked field. It was pretty good. And at that point, it became apparent, though, that 3 previous Olympians were going to try again. And that was kind of unusual. So Shannon Miller, Dominique Dawes, Carrie Strug, they're going to go again. And they're already world class. I mean, they're already Olympic level. Yeah. And I'm like, well, there's 3 spots.
Of the
right
7.
There. There's 3 spots right there. So there's 4 left, 4 spots left. And J.C. Phelps was really proving herself to be super consistent, right there in the mix. So really, I thought, well, I think there's 3 spots. We got 3 spots.
You're listening to Stick the Landing podcast by Iron Business Solutions. As a gymnastics club owner, do you set your tuition according to what your competition in the area is charging? Do you wish your program generated more revenue so you could afford to pay you and your staff what you're worth? We have a tuition calculator package that for less than $500 will do a full market analysis, give you your low tolerance, high tolerance, and sweet spot for your tuition, as well as a plan including marketing materials to get your tuition up to market tolerance. Adjust your tuition to charge what you're worth confidently thanks to the Tuition Calculator package. Check us out on the web for more information. Link in the description.
We got 3 spots to try to that I think are going to be open, and it's going to be very, very difficult to do. But we had 2 girls. Chrissy was injured, so she didn't make the World Trials, but Donnie and Teresa made the World Championship team in '95.
Christy was injured for the 95 stuff, but prior to her injury, was she competing at a relatively similar level of success rate?
Earlier in that year, she won the American Cup.
Yeah, okay. That's what I thought.
And kind of a fun story, she was training incredibly well going into that meet. And she was an alternate, by the way. Only got in because Dominique Dawes declined the meet. So Christy got to be in. And Christy and Donnie were also on the Pan American team. So we were going to leave from the American Cup in Seattle and fly down into Argentina to be part of the Pan American Games immediately after. But anyway, so she now gets to be in the meet. She's training so well. And I remember telling her, Christy, if Shannon Miller falls, you're going to win this meet. I told her that. And I just could tell she was just on fire. Everything was clicking. And sure enough, in the preliminary round, Shannon fell on her signature move on beam,
the
by
Miller.
the way. Yeah, the Miller. And Christy and I looked at each other and smiled. And sure enough, Christy won the meet.
Wow.
Yeah, won the meet.
Amazing. All right, so let's take it back to Donnie. 96 arrives, and Donnie's not at championships or trials. Tell us what happened and take us all the way through the best part. You know the part I'm talking about. And don't spare anything. Tell us about the straw that broke the camel's back and what that was like, and tell us the happy part.
Well, the sad part is it was pretty obvious in the training. She just wasn't as happy as she'd been in years prior. And I had been warned from other coaches who'd gone before me that things change when these juniors become seniors. There seems to be a lot more pressure, and the athletes kind of know, it's coming up to this, trying to make the Olympics. And I didn't know. I mean, I didn't believe, I didn't know. I thought that it can't be that much different. But I really think subconsciously there really was. And there was, as we got closer and closer to things, she just seemed to be less happy, and she started having back pain. And so she's not able to train the same diligence that she'd been doing. And we had a couple of really fun new tricks in her routine we had to pull out. So it was clearly not becoming as fun for her.
Of those 3 little dynamos that you had all at that point, did you feel like Donnie was analytically, objectively the most likely, or maybe the most talented, the most gifted? Or were they all the same?
They were all equally talented. I really do believe. But what Donnie had kind of established was she hit. She was incredibly consistent. Christy would be next. Teresa was not at a stage where she was hitting often because she was going through a tremendous amount of injuries through her growth stages. She just knees hurting and this hurting and back hurting and then a hamstring pull. And
takes forever.
Yeah, it was just, she was always fighting something like that. And her movement was beautiful, but she couldn't train to the level of consistency that so she wasn't getting the same opportunities where Christy was and Donnie were traveling around to different international meets, and Teresa wasn't being able to do that. But she got healthy enough before the World Trials. Donnie was wrestling a back injury at that particular time,
and
still
Donnie
made
says,
it. Yeah, and we got through the World Championships, and it was obvious she wasn't happy. I mean, she did a great job. Donnie did a fabulous job. So did Teresa, but she wasn't happy, and so she came in and said, I don't want to do it anymore. And I wasn't surprised in that her body language showed she wasn't happy. No, her performances were great. I mean, she's still doing fantastic gymnastics, but I believe if you're not really loving it, it's pretty hard to keep going.
It's a lot of work.
And so her parents really wanted me to talk her in to keep going, but I'm like, this is a really hard sport. And if you don't love it, pretty hard to do the the grueling work it's going to take. So I don't think we can.
So
I don't think we can.
she hangs it
convince
up.
her. She
And,
does.
and
Yeah,
there's
she
a point
retires.
because you're a human, the same as I'm a human and whatever, where you're not disappointed in her or angry at her or whatever, but there is some sort of like lingering hurt inside because you're like, oh man, we had this opportunity and we couldn't continue the
I was
opportunity.
sad.
Yeah.
I was sad.
And years go by, and unfortunately for Donnie, she had people in her ear that maybe weren't telling her the whole truth. And there became some tension between you, Lori, and Donnie.
Well, we fell out of touch.
Yeah.
And they moved out of the state, and we just didn't have any communication with her anymore. And I felt really sad because we'd known her since she was 7 and spent certainly as much time with her as we did our own children. So it felt like there was a hole,
Yeah.
that was, that felt, I was, again, sad that we didn't fix that and then, a number of years go by and she ends up marrying J.D. Reeve, who we knew because he was on the national team at the same time in the 90s. And I happened to be speaking at Congress one year and found out, J.D.'s there and Donnie's there. And I think it was J.D. who convinced her to, let's get back together with your coaches. Let's talk.
Yeah.
And so we did. We did do it. We were at the convention center, and I remember when she walked in to where we were having lunch or something like that, and we cried. I mean, it was it was so healing to get back together and have a friendship. And we've been friends since, and she's got 2 wonderful boys that are also, by the way, fantastic gymnasts. So, yeah, it's just, it feels really good to have that healed.
So I suspect when you coach your athletes, you coach relationally.
Yes.
Is that a fair statement? I do as well. And I know plenty of people who are excellent coaches and not bad at all for kids, not this old school garbage, but aren't relational. Just sort of like, hey, I'm the coach. I get paid to do a job, and I'm going to do the job and whatever. And that's good for them that they can. I can't exist that way. And so especially you get years and hours a day in all those years, they add up, and it isn't the same as your own child, but you start to get these kind of feelings, and I can imagine where you go years where you fall out of touch with somebody that you had this intimate of a relationship with, and it could feel a little bit like you have an estranged child, and through whatever, you guys have this awesome moment of reconciliation.
Yeah,
and we shared a little bit our faith already at the start of this podcast, but you and I, we're both Christians, and we both know in the amount that you forgive, so too will you be forgiven. And because I'm a guy that's in need of a whole lot of forgiveness, I'm all about extending grace and mercy. And so like 20 years ago, we had a kid that was on my daughter's like level 4 team or whatever, and she was a super sweet kid. But her mother and I didn't see eye to eye on how she should be interacting with other parents in the bleachers. And it got to a point where we had to gently ask her to find another place to do gymnastics. And she did. And 3 months later, the kid quit because she loved being at ETC and with her teammates and didn't like it anymore. About a year after she quit, so now 15 months later, I get a phone call from a number I don't recognize, and it's the mom. And she says, hey, my daughter really misses gymnastics, and specifically, she really misses ETC gymnastics. Is there any way you can forgive me?
Wow.
And we can get past this? And of course I can. Hey, forgive me for the immature ways I handled your departure, and I forgive you, and let's bring her back. And the beauty of it is, this kid stayed with us all the way through level 10, was a good gymnast for us.
Oh, that's good.
Worked for us while she was in college. She's a nurse now. Her mom works for us, has worked for us for about 10 years, and her dad is a builder. And he's built me 2 buildings for my different gyms and a 3rd building if you count the garage he built for my boat.
Wow.
So it's just this really cool story of how not being that hard guy about, no, this will teach you for
Right.
not right. Just saying,
Right.
hey,
Yeah.
you made a mistake. I made a mistake. One of the things I say to people is, if I don't want people to see me solely as the man I was 10 years ago, then who am I to hold against another man who they were 10 days ago?
Right.
Right?
Yeah, that's good.
It's about growth.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. So, all right, let's get back to gymnastics in the early 90s, and we've kind of cycled through Downey, and we've talked a little bit about Teresa and Christy. Let's keep going for a minute on Teresa, because Mary Lee and I went into extensive discussions regarding the cluster bomb that 92 trials were.
96.
No, 92 was where Amanda was snubbed. She
Oh,
earned
yeah.
a spot. And by the way, it wasn't just Amanda. There was I keep thinking of whatever that crazy movie is with the fraternities where you're on double secret probation. Well, there was like a double secret tryout where kids who didn't participate in the classic or the trials suddenly showed up on the team, and kids who did participate weren't even alternates or whatever. So then there was some sort of a little bit more clarification going into 96 about, well, this is how we think we're going to do it. And again, it wasn't set in stone. And you go to 96, and Teresa, I want to make sure I get this right, so let me check my notes here. Teresa was 11th at championships,
Correct.
right? Did this mean, because they only took 7 kids, that finishing in 11th at championships meant she was veritably eliminated even if she did well at trials? Or did she still have a shot?
I think she still had a shot.
Okay, and what was she going to have to do? What did people tell you? All right, Tom, this is what you'll need to do in order for... Did you know hardcore facts like, if X, then Y? Or were you going, well, if X, we hope Y? What was going on?
Well, I was actually on the IEC committee at that time,
Well,
creating that rule.
certainly makes it better.
And I think, the purpose of the petition process was we had 3 Olympians that were going to try again, and they're older, and they were clearly the best athletes in the country at that time. And we wanted to provide some avenue to help them in the case there was an injury and they could be ready in time to compete in Atlanta. We would want them on the team. So that was
So there was a
purpose behind
petition
it.
process.
There was.
For trials,
There
no
was.
problem. But
And
then
then
did you know, what I'm asking sort of is, you got 11th at championships,
Yeah.
which was part of the combination of things, because it wasn't just trials, or was it?
It was.
It was just trials at
It
that
was
point.
trials,
Okay.
except if you were one of the petitioning athletes, and you had to have the criteria to do so. Dominic Mosciano and Shannon Miller met that criteria, and they took advantage of it. So they had an injury, so they petitioned, and I don't remember which one did what. One of them did the trials, and one of them didn't do, and she didn't do championships, and one did do championships and didn't do the trials, something like that, which meant you
But the
took
rest
that
of you
one
guys
score,
had to go to
do
all of
both.
them.
Had to do both.
Yeah.
But what they did is they took both those scores and doubled it, basically.
Yeah.
Is what they got to do. And
And so what you guys had to do is take your 11th place score and add it to whatever place you got at trials.
Yeah.
And if those 2 scores together were top 7, you made the team.
yes.
Okay,
Now,
so
and I was under the assumption, well, if one is injured, then she's out. No, she's not going to be able to do it. That's what I thought. And, they weren't injured enough to be out, but that's why I thought we still have a shot here.
Okay.
But I did know that literally she can't make a mistake. We can't have a fall. And she ended up having a fall on the compulsory beam routine. Very uncharacteristic for her to do. And then the compulsories weighed 60% of your score, not 50-50. And because of that weight, the fall took 9/10 off her routine instead of 5. And that's how she missed the cutoff. Because
Oh, my
even though she finished 6th in the all-around, it still bumped her down after the petitions were accepted. It bumped her out. So she became the first alternate.
Okay, so she finished in 8th according to the criteria once you
Correct.
dumped the petitioners
Correct.
in there. All right. Now, I know this for a fact, so I want to give you a chance to state your piece about Teresa being the alternate for the 96 games. Talk to us
'Cause
about
you
that.
know how I feel about that.
Yes.
So Teresa was the official alternate at that time, and the reason why I can say that is It was in Atlanta, so we didn't fly to Atlanta. We stayed in Colorado Springs to train, and we were told you got to keep her in routine shape for compulsories and optionals because there's a deadline, 24 hours prior to the first team qualification, where if there's an athlete that gets hurt, we're bringing her in, and that's what the alternates do.
Yeah.
But we're not in Atlanta, we're in Colorado Springs. She doesn't get apparel. She never gets recognized as the first alternate. So to this day, she's never been recognized as the alternate. And we remember the phone call 24 hours beforehand. Kathy Kelly calls and says, hey, thanks for staying up, but no one got hurt, so we don't need you. Click. And
What a bummer.
it's just so, it's really,
And
it's
had
hurtful.
the
It's
96
hurtful to her.
games been in, I don't know, Toronto,
Oh, they'd have,
she would have gone. She'd
Oh,
have
yeah.
been an alternate. She'd have had apparel.
Sure.
Everything. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
instead, because they were in the United States.
yeah. And nowadays we bring 3 to 4
Yeah.
alternates in case. But yeah, it's disappointing for her. She's never been recognized, and I think it's a shame for USA Gymnastics. They don't correct that.
Yeah. Well, I agree. I share your opinion having heard this story. She deserves something send her a jacket. Come on, USA Gymnastics. Send her a jacket. All right, so let's get to the third kid, Christy Powell.
Yep.
And we've covered her some already. Tell us what she was like as an athlete. Did she have some characteristics that made her easy to coach or hard to coach?
Yeah, the 3 of them were very different. And so Teresa was very solemn and very focused and very serious, always was. And so you knew that she was always kind of dialed into what she needed to do. Christy was very happy and go lucky. And I knew in a competition, I kind of had to get her to settle down and kind of, calm down. We got to get, Donnie would get a little too serious and I had to make her smile. So they were all 3 a little bit different. But one of my favorite things about Christy was she had this insatiable desire to do things no one else has done. And it's, as a creative coach for me, I loved that.
Yeah.
She wanted to try other things. So one skill no one knows about that she did, she'll remember. She came to us from Cyprus with a really beautiful ginger on the bars, but I taught her a ginger with a half turn and caught the bar in a mixed grip. But with her injury and stuff, we ended up never actually being able to put that into a routine. It was so
we don't
cool.
have it's not
No.
called a Powell.
No, Ken, it was so cool. It was awesome. But I don't know, people back then would remember.
Wait,
Teresa
do you have
did
decent video of this?
Jaeger, no. Teresa did a Jaeger caught in a mixed grip. She was the first to do that. Donnie did a hop with a 1.5 twist over the bar back in the day. And so
Do you have videos of any of those things?
I don't.
Oh.
There's
Well, video or it didn't happen, Tom.
I know. Yeah, well. But Gymnastics Magazine had a sequence like shot by shot, like a
Yeah.
of those things of Teresa and Donnie doing their things. I have that. I got
Okay.
the pictures of it.
Well, I thought if it was a video, it could be overlaid on us right now and people could see these cool
Yeah.
things. But
No, I don't have that.
yeah, thanks for nothing.
Yeah, no internet then either, Ken.
True.
So,
All right. So let's scoot way forward. Let's skip all the way ahead to 2016. And the Carollis retire. And shortly thereafter, poop goes down at USA Gymnastics. We had the Nassar scandal, which exposed more than just the Nassar stuff, right? And Valeri gets named to succeed the Carollis. And in 2018, there's like major heat. And it's so much heat that Valeri resigns. And your opinion, and I know this because we've talked about this, was that Valeri was actually doing an excellent job. Tell everybody what Valeri's key statement was to everybody that completely changed how camps were run.
Well, I was asked to join the camps in 2008, and Marta was in charge of the camps at that particular time. I did that for 2 seasons, and then I quit. And a couple months after I quit, I got a call from Kathy Kelly, and she said that Marta had turned the camps over to Valeri, and Valeri would like for you to join him with bars.
And part of why you quit was you had some sort of philosophical difference in there.
Yeah, I had a falling out really with Marta philosophically of how things were. And so I just didn't want to do that anymore. under her leadership. I just
Yeah.
wasn't inspired to do that anymore. And Valeri I knew, and so I thought this is a really cool opportunity to learn from him. And in my opinion, MARTA was using these camps as kind of talent finders. And what they really needed was to be education,
Yeah.
right? That's what they needed. But anyway, so I go to the first camp with as Valeri as a leader, and he has a big meeting with all the coaches. And the first thing he says is, "Show us your mistakes
Mm-hmm.
because we want to help you." And I knew right then, this is going to be my home. I found what I want because I want to help coaches. I want to pass forward what Muriel and Tammy Biggs did for me. I want to pay that forward. I want to help these coaches. And that's exactly what we need to be doing, is helping these coaches with their athletes. And it became the most exciting part of my professional career to this day. When he was running those camps, we had so much fun and helped so many people.
So Valeri was instrumental in a major positive culture shift
Clearly.
at the national camps, but was still unable to survive the onslaught that came in the aftermath. And I'm not downplaying what happened and what was uncovered in 2016. And I understand why people are like, hey, we have got to completely clean house. But he was, could we say, an unfortunate victim of the house cleaning? Because I'm sure he made mistakes. Listen, Mary Lee and I talked in our thing that we openly admitted, hey, we made mistakes. Like,
Every coach has made mistakes.
yeah, and stuff that we regret. Man, I wish I would have treated this kid.
It's like being a parent. If
Yeah.
you're a parent, you're like, oh, I wish I wouldn't have.
And so Valeri was forced essentially to resign, even though
no,
he had already.
he chose.
Oh, he chose.
Yeah, he chose.
Okay.
He chose. It was the amount of criticism and complaints and so forth was very, very hard on his family. And he just thought it was best for a time to step aside for a time and then come back later.
Okay.
And so that's why he did
So
that.
then in 2018, the U.S. is without a national team coordinator.
Yep.
And without a lot of stuff because a lot of house was cleaned there.
Yeah.
So talk us through, like, what led you to apply? What was the application process like? And what were your feelings in that and the story behind being offered the job? Because I already know it's a super interesting story. So let's go.
Well, when I found out that Valeri had resigned, I was in my big meet, the Pikes Peak Cup in Colorado Springs in February, and I'd heard a rumor, and then it became true, and I was super sad because I'm trying to imagine who would I be willing to work for in the same circumstance. And honestly, I think Chow. Do you remember Chow?
Sure.
But
yeah.
he'd taken the job with China,
Yeah.
so he wasn't in the United States, and I just thought, I don't think there's anybody I would really work for, and so I'm done. I just thought I'm done. And a couple months went by, and I was, hearing rumors of what was going on among the national team because there wasn't a director or so forth. And then at one of the camps, Kerry Perry, the new president, chose some poor decision making and fired Rhonda Fain during the middle of the camp.
Yeah.
And all the national team coaches are there present, and the whole thing seems to be falling apart. And I get a phone call from Steve Rybacki, and I think Dan Baker was on the line too. And he had said, hey, we just said, he explained what happened to Rhonda, and there's no leadership. And the coaches we all voted that we unanimously thought you should apply until Valeri, wants to step back in. And I thought, no. No. I don't, I just don't think I have the qualifications for that. And
Did you think you didn't have the qualifications for it because you didn't have the...
Well, think who the two previous people were.
Sure.
Marta Caroli, one of the most world-famous coaches of any sport, coached Olympic gold medalists. Valeri Liukin, also the same, and an Olympian himself. And me? No.
Okay.
No.
All right. I was wondering if some of that was tied to... I don't think I have the credentials to deal with some of the baloney that's happening right now.
No,
But you honestly
it was
thought,
just
hey,
yeah.
I don't know if
I
I'm
don't have
qualified for the
the
job.
pedigree, the reputation for that, and I
So
did
who
know.
talked you into it? Who talked you into applying?
Well, my wife actually said it. She's the one who realized it's not a coaching job; it's a leadership job, and she said that you can do. And so I called Valeria and I asked. I said, "Hey, I've been asked to apply, and I want to know what you think because I don't want to do it if you don't think so." And he said, "Yeah, you should because that way you can keep going. You know what we've worked so hard for." And I said, "Great." And then when you're ready to come back, cheers. I got no problem. I'd like to go right back to doing bars at the Elite
Yeah.
Development Camp. Got no problem with that. And at the same time, they move up Annie Heffernan from the JO program into the Elite World, and she's now replaced Rhonda Fain. And so she's new in the job. I'm new in the job. And well, I hadn't gotten the, I applied and I got called to do an interview.
Okay, yeah. Tell us about this interview.
That interview did not go well to me.
What indicators did you have that the job didn't go
Carrie
well?
Perry's view of the role of a coach and the role of athlete, we were just not on the same page at all. And I left that interview and told Lori, I said, yeah, there's no way. It's not going to happen. And a couple of days later, I get a call for a second interview. And I'm like, you got to be kidding. And so I go to the second interview. And in my opinion, it went worse.
You went to the second interview from Colorado Springs to Indianapolis.
Yeah.
Who paid for the flight?
Well, they did.
Oh, okay.
But they didn't pick me up at the airport. They didn't take me back to the airport. I mean, I was just like, it was.
So more indicators like, I don't know.
I don't know about this. And Carrie met with me and her attorney, who didn't say anything the whole time I was there. Just me and her attorney in a little office. No
Her
gymnastics
attorney,
people.
Like, what in the world?
Yeah.
What are they there for?
And I thought this interview went worse. Just we're not on the same page as to how much freedom athletes and say they have. And I'm like, the average athlete age of them, they're 14. They can't even drive. And you want to give them full decision making in their careers? I'm like, I just don't think so. So anyway, I went home depressed, thinking that I don't think USA Gymnastics is going to make it. Honestly, I thought she clearly does not understand this sport at all. And I felt really bad. And a couple of days later, she called me and said, "Congratulations, you got the job." And I remember telling her, "Are you sure? Were you?"
Did you mean to call Tom?
Yeah. And she goes, "You sound surprised." And I said, "Well, weren't you there at the interviews? I don't think those went well at all." And she goes, "Oh, I disagree." And I knew right then, she's clueless. She's clueless.
Wow.
And she gave me the job.
Well, that's when I knew she was clueless. When she gave you. I'm just kidding. The last podcast, I spent a good amount of time extolling the virtues of you being the right man for the job, and I still mean that, and not just when you're in that chair. It was the perfect balance. It's what I think USA Gymnastics needed. So there's a few key changes, and I want you to talk about the first change you made when you were appointed. The appointment of the new dance teacher, and tell us why that was relevant and what a great move that was. An actual former athlete of mine. Go on.
Yeah. So, my wife retired from coaching, and she is a choreographer in theater, and so she was meeting dancers from different shows coming into Denver and so forth through friends of ours. And Taylor Swift came through the town, and some of her dancers for the show came over to our house for a meal.
Charity was one of them.
And we met this girl, Charity Baroni. And so now I'm supposed to be, leading these camps, and I knew we had to have some real culture change that was not just words, but action. And so I ended up not bringing back the previous dance person who'd been there for decades, and I brought in Charity Baroni. And Charity was not only a choreographer, but she's a backup dancer or whatever, the dancer at concerts for Taylor Swift, Selena Gomez, Beyonce, Katy Perry.
Yep.
And so I thought these girls are really going to like her. She has no history of gymnastics. She has no baggage to bring with her attached to the previous regime, nothing. And her strength is teaching performance.
Yeah.
And we needed better artistry. And so we brought her in, and I told her, this is your goal. Get relationships with these girls and get them to perform and come out of their shell. And I'll do my best to keep the coaches off your back, and you get these girls to
And in fact,
love moving.
you had a rule for the coaches when they
they
rotated
had
to their
leave
dance
her-
rotation.
Yeah, they had to leave Charity alone for her to do her thing.
Because
Well, the athletes typically, when their coach is there, they act different. You know, they hold back, and so I wanted them not to feel that,
Yeah.
and they had to be free to be whatever they needed to be with Charity.
And great thing about Charity, she comes from such a solid, like put together family. Like really,
Oh yeah,
you know,
oh yeah,
they're
yeah,
just
yeah.
awesome people. And if you're saying, hey, the first move I'm going to make for the culture is to bring in somebody, what a call, what an
Yeah.
absolute home run. All right, the next sort of moment for you came when you selected Reagan to be an alternate and Riley McCusker fell on beam during qualifications for the team for the Olympics.
Yeah, it was 2018. We had World Championships in Doha, and that's the first Olympic Games where you can qualify to the first Worlds you can qualify to the Olympics. So
As a
it's
team.
important as a
Yeah,
team.
yeah, yeah.
So you
Yep.
you gotta do well. Which Simone's come out of retirement, so we're pretty convinced we're gonna be good. And I'm new in the role, obviously, and I picked based on how they were training day after day after day, who I felt was the most consistent on each event, and I did pick Riley to be on beam in the lineup, and she ended up falling in the team qualification.
A kid who, in training, just
Trained
because you
incredibly
went
well.
by the numbers.
Yeah, trained incredibly well, and so it was. No one's perfect; things happen, but the next 3 workouts that we had were back, and here are the assignments. You got to hit 3 routines. You got to do this. You got to do that. She's doing it all. I mean, just knocking it out of the park, doing great. So I decided this is an opportunity to show again things are different. And I'm not going to abandon her because she had a fall. Her training is
Yes.
great.
Thank you. Yes.
And so I'm going to keep her in the lineup.
I like the phrase, I'm not going to abandon her, because
She was
under the previous regime,
That was the
You
rumor that was
fall.
happening. Yeah, that was kind of the story that was happening. And but I knew, Ken, if she falls again, my credibility would be erased. And I would have zero leadership capabilities after that. And so I was just like, oh man, I hope I'm right. But I believe that you're going to perform your standard when under pressure. And she ended up tying Simone on beam in that meet and had the highest execution score in the whole competition on beam in that meet. And luckily she did that because it really, it was
Well,
a big turning point.
you had a phrase that impacted me. You used it at those Devo camps a bunch, and you used it again today at lunch. And your phrase was, under pressure, you perform your average.
Yeah.
And
I believe that for the most part.
well, you're a super data-driven, analytical guy,
Yeah.
right? And the data confirms. It's not your gut telling you, well, I think this. Like
Yeah.
the data confirms that.
And there's times that they perform above their average, and there's
Sure.
once in a while they perform below it. But overall, they perform whatever. So the key is raise your average, raise your standard to be world class. And that's exactly what these girls were doing. Their standard routine was world class.
And you getting back again to your average statement, I was just thinking about Michael Jordan, who all reasonable people know is the greatest of all time, not LeBron James. Maybe I'll have LeBron on one time and just
sure.
tell him to his face.
Not now, you won't.
But the stories, and I don't know Michael Jordan, but all the stories, anything you can read or watch about him, is he practiced on the same level that he competed at. And he says that is why he was so good in the NBA, because practice or game, it was the same to him.
Expectations.
Yeah. And so he shows up and it's NBA championships. And if he's going to perform his average and his average looks like what he does every day in practice, yeah, he's going to be all right. You're listening to Stick the Landing podcast by Iron Business Solutions. Do you feel like you're alone and on an island because gymnastics businesses face unique challenges and you're throwing mud at a wall to see what sticks? How would you like to have Ken Harris or Tom Forrester in one-on-one private sessions as your business mentor? Check out the Iron Business Solutions Gold Medal Business Package on the web for more information. Link in the description. All right, so we get to the 2019 American Cup, and Simone chooses not to participate, which explained to our listeners, like, that's not an ego thing. That's a thing that you earn.
Well, and I mean, obviously we, television-wise, it's good for everybody if you have your star athletes on TV. But really, the athlete, they get to decide, and the coach decides, is it good timing for them? Is it not good timing for them? And Simone clearly didn't need more experience, right? She's already an Olympic champion and multiple world champion. She's the GOAT, and she didn't want to do it. It didn't fit in her training plan, which is fine. And so we got to pick, who's going to be.
And how many
representing
kids
the
do we
United
send to
States.
American Cup?
Two.
Yeah, two.
Send two.
Yep.
So based on how they were training at the camp, I picked Leanne Wong and Grace McCallum.
Mm-hmm. And Leanne.
Yeah. So what the gymnastics community never knew is the morning everybody's leaving the training camp, Grace and Leanne were going to fly to the American Cup, train there, and then compete at the American Cup. And
that's 5 days out?
Yep.
Yeah.
And we had a morning training, and Leanne had a very scary fall on bars during a Jaeger. And enough so, the trainers are there. It was bad. And she ended up, no concussion, but she's hurt. We have to make a decision now. Does she stay in the lineup? Do we bring in the alternate? In this case, the alternate was actually her teammate, Kara Aker. And so I knew her coaches, Al and Armene Fong, and they have Olympians themselves. I mean, they have so much experience, and I know they don't want to put their own athlete in jeopardy. I knew that. So I quickly called a meeting with the trainer, the doctor, and them, and I said, listen, first off, if the doctor says she's not going on, then discussion's done, and she's not going on, and Kara's going to be put into her place. And the doctor said, well, if you can modify her training, we can do therapies with her. She might be okay. And I asked Alan Armene, what do you think? Because if you believe that she can do this, then I'm not going to bring in the alternate. We're going to stick with her. We're going to do that.
And so for the people that aren't as familiar, Al Fong has so many bona fides, right? He'd already had an Olympian. He's been to multiple world championships.
Yep.
It's not like he needed an American Cup to add to his resume. Right. So there was very little chance of him saying something about Leanne just for his own ego, especially when the kid that was going to make it was also one of his kids anyway, right? Yeah. So
no, he and Armene, their egos were not involved. They truly believed, what's best for their athlete. That's their job. That's what they were going to do. And I knew that. So I trusted them. And they said, no, we think we can have her ready. And I said, okay, then we're gonna hang with it. So we allowed them to modify every practice, not even practice sometimes, which never happened before.
Yep.
And she did all the therapies that she needed to do. And she got ready just in time and ended up beating Grace by 1/10 or 9/10 of a point. I mean, just
and beating Grace meant gold medal.
Yeah,
she
got
won
the gold
because we went 1-2.
Yep.
And again, it's significant because this is a significant cultural shift under the new regime.
Yeah,
and we are getting the results.
Yeah, we're still winning. We're still winning. Yes. And at one point, I made a comment to all the national team coaches at one of the training camps that, listen, I really appreciate what Marta did for America. First of all, she unified us, created a system where we would gather together as coaches and athletes, iron sharpens iron, to train together. And there was accountability. You had to show up and do things. And had she not done that for us, I really don't think America would be where we're at, being
Yeah.
the best world. I really don't. She did that for sure. And so that was really, really a tribute to what she did.
And she had a role in the garbagey stuff, right?
Some of that.
But you and I have said, like, two things can be true.
Yeah.
You can
Yeah.
make some mistakes, do some things wrong here, and do some good over here.
Yeah. But what I told the coaches was, listen, we were winning with her for sure. You won again with Valeri because Morgan Hurd, out of nowhere, wins the world championships,
Yep.
and no one had heard about her before. We knew her coming up through the elite development camps. Then they win on a couple of international meets when there was no director in that spring of 2018, and they won then. Now there you got me involved. My point is, it isn't the director or the coordinator that's determining who wins. It's you guys, personal coaches, going back, doing the work on a daily basis in your gyms. So it doesn't matter who's leading this show. If you don't do that on a daily basis, we're not going to be the best in the world.
Mm.
But it isn't the coordinator that determines that we're the best in the world. It's these personal coaches doing the job day after day.
Sure,
after day.
but having a kid that was in the developmental camps, I want to give some credit to the coordinator. Is when you facilitated and Valeri facilitated a learning environment in those camps, it literally enabled us coaches to go back and do what we needed to do, because you admitted yourself in the 90s it was guesswork,
Yeah, it was.
right?
Yeah.
And you guys took the guesswork out for us by
Oh, that's a nice
by being
compliment.
there.
Thank
Well,
you.
it's sincere.
Thanks.
All right. Basically what we had a shift from a style of coaching that was like the military. We were the commanders, the commanding officers, and our athletes were the soldiers. And we commanded and you did. And in terms of results, it was effective. In terms of what was good for human beings, not very effective. And then the culture shifted way to the other extreme, which pendulums tend to do, right?
Right.
And swung all the way to this point where we were sort of expected to be Barney the Purple Dinosaur and still produce these results.
Yeah.
And somehow Tom Forrester comes in, says, all right, we can't be Barney the Purple Dinosaur, but we're going to be under a ton of scrutiny, like microscopic level scrutiny.
It was, we were being watched by senators, and gymnastics was on everybody's radar and really watching us. How are kids being treated? Is anything changed? They want to know, has anything changed?
And just for the record, I think senators should still watch gymnastics. I think everybody should watch gymnastics. It's great. And sign your kids up. All right. So the Olympics were supposed to happen, obviously, in 2020, and COVID happened instead. And it interrupted our Olympic Games. And the first thing I want to hear is, because you were at such a high level, I'm sure you were part of some of these FIG calls or meetings or IOC meetings or heard stuff anyway. Were there any like really just outlandish ideas on how to make the Olympics happen? Or like, were people suggesting really dumb things and you're going, oh my gosh, why are we? Or did everybody just know, hey, we're not going to have these Olympics and we'll just have to figure it out?
Well, for a little while, it was 50-50. We just weren't sure. So there was discussions. Could it even take place? How would that transpire? Annie Heffern and I had gone to Tokyo a year prior to go visit where the site was and, do an Olympic site visit. And so we were kind of familiar with what the procedures were going to be, where the Olympic Village was, that type of thing. And then we got the report the U.S. team is going to be on the 12th floor and there's one elevator. And I'm thinking, okay, it's COVID time. So you know how many, they're only going to let so many people, you remember those days? Only
Yeah.
so many people on an elevator. So I just thought this is going to be misery. So to the new president, Li Liang, we went to her and said, Mary, and also with me was Brett McClure for the men.
Okay.
And we went to him, Lily, and said, can you find money in the budget to put us off-site somewhere where we don't have to deal with that? Because we want to avoid an athlete coming down with COVID and being pulled. And then possibly the team gets pulled, right? I mean, so to her credit, she did. She's like, okay, we did a lot of investigating. Somebody did. Found a hotel right across the street from the venue where we were going to compete. And that's where Team USA men and women stayed. And so we had that part solved. But they hadn't, you're going to be tested every day, how that was going to transpire. So there were a lot of things they just hadn't figured out yet. So halfway through 2020, I didn't even think it was going to happen in 21. It didn't seem like it was going to happen. But, and then clearly it did. But even then, there was still some ambiguity about, remember Jade Carey being one of the individuals, how the rules were for that. It was so confusing and so ambiguous, and we couldn't get straight answers. Can we pull Jade from this and put her on the team?
Was COVID affecting policy that way, or was this just a
No,
lack of
no, it was
organization because
just-
they changed the rules because they
Yeah.
hate America and wanted us to lose?
Well, that
Well, you
wasn't-
can't say
yeah,
that, but I can.
Yeah, I'm not saying that, but
I am.
it was so between those dealing with these insane qualifications that FIG had set up and COVID, I just had a feeling something's going to happen at this Olympics. I don't know what it is. Something's going to happen. And safe sport, and I'm thinking, you just don't know.
Sure.
Um,
And you signed up for that.
well,
You're like, well, I
but
guess.
at this point, I really thought, well, Valeri's going to be back before then, so I'm not going to have to do that. And the board wouldn't bring him
Carson
back.
Valeri.
Yeah, the board wouldn't bring him. It wasn't his decision; it was the board. And so, anyway,
Well, let's hit some strategy.
okay,
Because the Olympics being postponed a year
yeah,
means some juniors are going to age up.
yep.
Some seniors may or may not have an extra year to get injured. Who in the United States, and we can talk about Russia in a minute, did this affect? Who benefited from the extra year, and did anybody really, dang it, this extra year hurt their chances?
Well, I think Kayla DeCello, Connor McLean now are age eligible. So that was neat for them, for sure. It really helped Jordan Childs because
Yeah.
the year prior she was dealing with some injuries and changed clubs, and so she wasn't, where she was in 2021.
Right.
But I really think it hurt Simone in that I think, it was another year for her. She's older. She had to hold on physically for another year, and it was hard. I mean, it's a painful sport, and she makes it all look easy, but it still hurts. I
Sure.
mean, And so I think it was harder for her. It was, but it helped Michaela Skinner, gave her another year.
Yeah.
I think it was difficult for Morgan Hurd because now she's, she had elbow issues. She's
Yep.
got to hold on another year. I think it hurt her. And these were just things out of our control. And then two of the top junior Russians,
Russians.
they now get to be on the team. And they wouldn't have been on the team in 2020.
And they made all the difference.
Totally. They were completely made the difference.
And you and I talked a little bit about this at lunch. I was under the impression that maybe that extra year helped Jade Carey, but you didn't think so.
No. I did think it was going to help Riley because Riley had changed clubs. She's
Yeah.
now training with Jade and Brian Carey, and she's getting better and better. And I'm excited because her artistry is so good. I really kind of envisioned she's going to be on the Olympic team because of her artistry and her bars are so, anyway. And we'd seen her in Phoenix during COVID because I went around, my wife and I, we went around to all these clubs to go check in and just support them. And
I think it's worth the audience knowing you and your wife went to the clubs or cities, at least, of the national team members during COVID.
Yeah.
And who funded that?
Me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because USA Gymnastics couldn't, and you felt it was important
Yeah.
to maintain contact. So this is why, like, I have a ton of admiration and respect for you, because I feel like I understand where you're coming from, and I can relate to, like, it's not just business, like, you care.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
care, and it showed. All right, I don't want to inflate your ego anymore than it already clearly isn't
Yeah.
inflated, because you're also very humble. All right, so we have Olympic trials, and the U.S. is stacked.
Yeah.
Stacked.
Did you go to the trials? Were you at that meet?
No.
It was unbelievable. It was so much fun. 20,000. I mean, it was just the energy in it. It was super cool. Now, Simone had kind of an off meet. I mean, she just
an
wasn't
off meet in
quite,
which she still won the
she's
all
still
around
scoring
handily.
She's still the highest scorer in the world.
Yeah.
With an off meet, right?
Yeah.
And Suni actually beat her on the second day. That's
I remember
the first
that. Yeah.
ever, right? Because she's just having an off meet. But I'm watching her train. She's putting in the work. She's not a slacker.
Okay.
She is doing everything that you would expect, and more than you'd expect, really, because if anybody should say, hey, I don't have to do what everybody else does because it would be her, and she never did that.
Wow.
She never did that.
So, backing up a second, because I did want to make this point, because we were talking about who was affected positively and negatively. If the Olympics had happened in 2020, my feeling was in 2020, the U.S. was so stacked.
Yeah.
And so far ahead of all the other countries that we could have fielded 2 teams and gotten gold and silver.
That's what people talked about. Yeah.
And I think you could mathematically prove that. I think you could say, hey, these are the scores that we're getting. And this is because the Russians weren't going to have those 2 juniors that turned out to be really good. So that's how stacked we are at trials. Now, again, the 2 Russian juniors aged up and proved to be formidable. You still had such a stacked field, and you had to decide who's on the team, who's an alternate, who gets a thanks for coming. So what was going through your mind? How did you select? What did a committee help you? Talk about the discussions.
Yeah.
Bring us behind the scenes.
There's a committee of me and 2 other people. And so it's not one person's decision. And, we have to follow the qualification procedures for sure. And so the top 2 finishers at the Olympic trials, they're automatically on the team. Even if they're brand new, you've never heard of them before. They're on, right? Well, that would be Suni and Simone. Go 1, 2. And so then the committee gets to pick, okay, how do we field the rest? And Jade had already qualified as an individual, so she's going to pick that one spot. But we earned 1 more individual spot. So we got to find who's going to take that spot and who's going to be the rest of the team. Now, Jordan Childs is...
And when Jade took the individual spot, it meant she wasn't going to be...
She could not be part of the team.
Yeah,
they finally told us she can't be part of the team. And so now... Everybody knows, floor and vault are her strengths. Simone, those are her strengths as well. Michaela Skinner, those are her strengths as well. So everybody was very surprised that we picked Michaela Skinner to be the other individual. She actually, I can't remember if we went rank order or she beat Grace by a little bit. I don't remember. So you have to do some research on that to find that out.
All right.
But I was actually, quite honestly, I knew both Riley and Michaela, and they were predominantly the 2 choices for this individual spot because Kara Aker was struggling a little bit at that time of the year on beam, just not hitting with kind of the same consistency. And beam, as you know, that's a very difficult event to hit. It's a hard one, right? huge margins of error, or small margins of error to make. So that was going to be tough to pick a beam person in that role. So now we're really kind of down to Riley or Michaela and the committee's decision. And I'm kind of politicking, quite honestly, for Riley because her bars are beautiful, and but her injury to her ankle was far worse than we knew, and so she wasn't training full routines leading into it. But her routine itself was good, but she wouldn't do the dismount. But I knew that. I knew Brian was smart and he was saving her. She's going to only do the dismount when it counts. And sure enough, on the first day of Olympic trials, she goes second to Suni. I mean, rocks it, just rocks it. But part of the committee didn't like the fact that she wasn't training full routines. I knew what he was doing and I was okay. And she just proved it.
Who else was on the committee again?
Tatiana Perskaya and
I don't know her.
Jessie DeZiel was an athlete representative. She used to be on the national team when she was younger as an athlete, and so she's the athlete representative on this committee. And so basically, the three of us kind of decided, well, if Riley hits the second day and does another 15 on bars, which is amazing, then that kind of tells all, and she'll be, the other alternate athlete to go, or I'm sorry, individual, not
Okay.
alternate. I'm misusing the term. She would be the other individual to go, which means she gets to compete, but her score can't count for the team. And she had a fall. So then I said, well, then, I think Michaela goes. And I remember Tim Daggett on he was one of the announcers. They were confused. Why would you do that? But, and when you think about one of my jobs, actually for the committee, not just mine, is let's give Americans the best chance to win medals as well.
So you sent Grace on the team, but you sent Michaela as the
individual.
Yeah.
And I just think, I really do believe that Grace scores were going to help more to the team than Michaela's based on Jordan Childs, Suni Lee, and Simone. That combination.
And at the
of
time, who the
athletes.
heck was going to predict
Right.
that Simone would be the one that would go down?
Yeah. No one knew that. And so, we picked Michaela, and I remember thinking, if anything happens to one of our leg event people, I mean, vault takes 4 seconds. We have a much better shot of winning on vault. And Michaela is one of the best vaulters in the world. So bars, it's a 30-second routine. There's a lot more that can go wrong.
Yeah.
So I really thought, if something happens, she's going to be there. If Jade makes a mistake or whatever it is. So anyway, we end up going there, and training seems to be going okay. Simone is not hitting quite the way she normally does.
Yeah, you're jumping me a little bit.
Oh, sorry.
But this is exactly where we were going. I was going to say, people, this is the moment you've been waiting for. We're going to tell the Simone story. I wanted to announce it, Tom, and you ruined my announcement. All right. Well, I forgive you.
Sorry. So we get there, and we go a week early to train off-site at a place called Juntendo with the alternates and the Olympic team. We're all together training. She's doing all the assignments. I mean, there's no indication that she has the twisties. Now, she's not hitting the same kind of routines that she had, but she's older. I mean, and she's still so good, and I think my own opinion was, I think she wanted to be done in 2020. At least her body did.
Sure.
And she's hanging in there and she's doing it. And
can you imagine being committing yourself in 2018 mentally through 2020, which is kind of what she did, right? Mm-hmm. And say, I'm going to go to these Olympics and then that'll be enough for me. Yeah. And because like we said, it takes so much out of you mentally and physically.
It does.
And then being told, well, hang on another year.
Yeah, another 14 months or whatever it was.
If she goes, well, I can't hang on another, then these last 2.5 years are for nothing, right? So she put her body and her mind through all that stuff from 18 to 20. If she just goes, forget it, I'm not doing it in 2020. Yeah. So kind of you go, well, I guess I got to hang on. But at the
Mhm.
same time, if you got to hang on, like you got to hang on and it's hard. It's hard on your body and hard on your mind. And so she hung on and
Yep.
you guys are training and maybe there was a bar dismount that went a little awry or
Well, she was pulling, she was pulling in a little close at times, just not her consistent self for sure. And it was showing up mostly on bar dismounts and beam dismounts, but not on floor at that time. Certainly not on vault, not on vault. And so we moved from that into the Olympic Village. Now we're training there. And still, again, everything seems to be training. She's not hitting like she did in 2019, but she's meeting all the assignments. Um, and so 2 days before, no, the team qualification goes, and she does not have a great meet for her and makes finals on every event.
yeah.
And she's finishes the day number 1. She's best in the world and finals on all 4 events. So if anybody thinks, oh, you knew what was happening, no, we didn't. I mean, she was.
Plus, let's make the realistic point. Even if you knew, what you gonna bench Michael Jordan because he's having a bad day?
No.
No. Get out of here. You're not benching Simone,
Nope.
even if you did know. So be quiet, armchair gymnastics coaches.
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah. And so anyway, 2 days before the team qualification, though, it's the last event of the day, and it's floor. And we're going to floor to do just our passes. We're not going to do full routines, but you're going to do each of your passes. And she's going to do her front through to a full end, and she bailed out of the full end and did an Arabian double front to her feet and then sat down. And, I'd never seen her do that before. And the look on her face was, I've never done that before. And her coaches were like, oh, so they talked. We didn't overreact. And then they had her try it again. But Laurent went and put a mat in, put a nice big soft mat for her just in case. And she did it again.
Hmm.
So we thought, no, stop, just not sure what's going on, but don't try again. Right. And you could see the anxiety in her face, just really, really scared, frustrated. And it was Sarah Jancy, Grace McCallum's coach, who came to me and said, hey, it's just the full end. Why don't we see if tomorrow she can do front through to a double layout and don't do the full end at all?
I mean, why not?
And it's going to be her last pass, by the way, I think. No, third pass. But, and she goes, and it raises her start value by 1/10. And I think I told you that I had a premonition something's going to happen at these Olympics between COVID and safe sport and whatever. And I thought, oh, what a great story is building. We're going to end up winning by 1/10 of a point because Sarah came up with the idea to replace that skill. This is going to be awesome.
Meanwhile, little old Ken Harris in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, is friends with Joy Umenhofer, who is USA Gymnastics tumbling and trampoline guru and lives 20 minutes from my house. And at the time is coming into my gym, helping with my kids. And she's getting texts from Laurent. And they're trying to find a gym in Tokyo where she can get on a trampoline because Joy is like, Joy is the epitome of her name. Her parents gave her the right name. She's just always happy and great. She's like, oh, I can fix this. Give her a pool noodle and a trampoline and I could have this solved in 15 minutes and whatever. But I guess they couldn't get in or something didn't work out. But here I am in the know. Like, old Kenny Boy's got the scoop. Simone is falling. What's going on? Because Joy knows. And she happens to be in the gym working with us when this is going on. All right, carry on. See, people, I'm important.
Yeah. Well, you had inside information I did not have. And, but it probably would have helped had I known because we could have maybe modified her trainings.
That's where I made my mistake. I forgot to call you.
Yeah. But, the personal coaches, their first job is to protect their athlete.
Yeah.
And if Laurent and Cecile felt this is best, we got to keep this, between us and we're going to work on this, then I respect that. That's what they needed to do. That Simone pays them to be her coach. and they were doing exactly what they felt was best.
We said
for
this
her.
at lunch. You, as the national team coordinator, were the ambassador for USA Gymnastics, and therefore your primary allegiance was to the USA team, right?
Correct.
Cecile and Laurent are Simone's ambassador. They are paid to do what is in the best interest of their athletes. And I had said even at lunch, like, hey, as an American on the couch, I want them to act in the best interest of the USA, right? So that I can say, yeah, we won gold, like
Right.
like I had anything to do with it, right?
Mhm.
But the reality is, when I take myself outside of the situation and look at it objectively, that's 100% right.
Yeah.
Her parents, but she pays them
Yeah.
to
Protect
be
her.
her advocate.
Yep.
Yeah.
Be her
and,
advocate.
And you're the one that's responsible for the team. So
Yeah.
I begrudge them nothing.
Yeah, me neither. Yeah. And so anyway, she does the new pass the next morning in training. It all goes well. So we're excited.
Great idea, Sarah.
Yeah.
Way to go.
Yep. And we go into, so how it works at the Worlds and Olympics is you get to warm up in the back gym, and on all 4 events, you finish on the event you're going to start on. So we're going to finish on vault, and then they're going to go out and you watched it on television and they start on vault, right? At that point, I have to leave and go into the audience to watch just like everybody else. But I'm watching the training in the back, and the bar dismounts a little close, but she makes it through her bar routine. She goes to beam. She's struggling, she's overdoing the dismount a little bit, but everything else seems to be fine. Floor, she does all her passes, but the triple twisting double was one of her worst ones. It wasn't great, but what do you tell her? I mean, it's a very, very difficult move. You don't say, well, do it again until you land it right. You don't, right? I mean, and she's so good as an athlete. And so we're fine. So we go to vault, and I showed you at lunch the picture.
Yeah.
And she finishes her Aminar vault, which is the Yurchenko with the 2.5
In the warm-up gym.
In the warm-up gym,
No problem.
smiling.
It's awesome.
I have that picture between her and Laurent smiling. At that point, I leave, and about 12, 14 minutes later, you saw what happened on TV.
Yeah.
And that never appeared ever on the vault that we saw.
Okay, so this happens, and now there are rules in place. You're on the clock.
Yeah.
There is a time at which Simone's name's going to pop up on the screen, and if she doesn't go, we got to take the 0.
Yeah.
And so you guys got to make decisions, but you're in the stands.
Yeah. So we get a text. Annie gets a text on her watch, and they only said Simone is out. But we don't know what that meant. We were not allowed to go around the arena then. So we see them all talking, and we had to eat the score. So we only got a 13 something. So, we're about down 1.5 or 2 points because of that vault score. But we just don't know what's going on.
I hate that Simone got that 13 something, but my claim to fame is that same year Annabelle got a 14-1 on that same vault. And so I always tell everybody that Annabelle beat Simone.
Wow,
on
Ken, you
vault.
should. People are going to listen to this podcast, I don't know if you
Well, people, you should know that's a joke.
Okay. So she starts putting her warm-up on, and all we know is we somehow have to tell the computer table that an alternate's going to replace her, because if they don't do that and Simone's name comes up on bars, which is our next event, and she's not on the floor to do her bar routine, we take a 0.
Yeah.
And no medal at all. And so, this had never happened before. And Annie and I are new, and so we're trying to figure out how to do this. And so I had the cell phone of one of the directors at FIG. So I text him, what's happening? What do we do? And eventually he saw his text and walked over to a table. I don't know what he said because we're, far away from each other. And we now don't know if it's going to work. But Simone comes back into the arena. She had to be evaluated by a doctor, approved not to continue for some reason. That's just the rule that they have. And she's in her warm-up, so clearly she's not moving on. So now, Jordan Childs, you're in. You're now going to take her place on bars. And Suni was told in the meet, she didn't warm up floor in the back because we wanted to rest her for the all-around finals.
Mm-hmm.
And she thanked me.
Yeah.
In the back gym. Thank you so much, because I get to rest my legs. I'm like, yeah, it's all going to work out. Well, now she's got to go after one touch and compete for the America on floor. And
No rest for her legs for
yeah,
the
no,
all-around thing, which
yep,
she ends up winning,
yep.
in part because Jess makes some strategic changes to her floor routine the night before. But I don't want to jump ahead. All right,
Yeah,
go ahead.
yeah. So, but to Simone's credit, had she tried to fight through it, and one, she could have been seriously injured, and that have been catastrophic. Or she just performs really poorly, which would be not like her, but it's possible, right?
Yep.
And now we got to eat that score. And so she did the right thing. She literally did what was best. And I feel good that she felt comfortable enough with the environment at the time, with her personal coaches, that she could make that decision. And it was the right decision. And and also to her credit, she came in and instead of pouting or moping, she was a great cheerleader. She was on the
Mm.
floor cheering those girls on, encouraging them. And you never know how an athlete's going to manage
And
this
sort of
sadness.
maybe
And
even
she was
had
awesome.
maybe even had a right to pout if she did, like
Well, people would have understood it, right?
yes, yeah.
But she didn't do that. And man, they rocked bars. They went to beam. We hit beam. We didn't hit floor as great as we could have, but it turned out to be a very exciting competition. And we still didn't know if maybe Simone could still do the all-around finals. What we just didn't know. And eventually she pulled out of every event except for beam, which opened the door for Michaela to step in as in her place in the vault finals, and she got the silver. So
Which was
turns
such
out,
a cool story.
yeah, and I just want to, no one ever said anything, but clearly the committee and myself, we made the right decision, and we got an extra medal.
You hear that, people? Tom was
We
right.
made the right decision, and Michaela got her Olympic medal, and it was
It ended up being one
so
of the
good.
feel-good stories
Yeah,
of
it
the
was so
Olympics because
good.
at home on TV, they were telling the story of Michaela sort of being always the bridesmaid
Yeah,
and not the
yeah.
bride, and here
Mhm.
she gets her medal. All right,
She got it.
let's jump in a time machine backward, because there was a critical year and a critical moment in time when your wife said, "I think it's time for me to retire."
Mm.
And you carried on for a period without her.
Mhm.
Um, and eventually you lost your fire, which led you to retire, which led you to be in a position where you were going to teach teachers. Talk me through briefly, what year was that? Fill us in briefly on the details there.
I think she really pulled back in 1999.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And, our kids were in high school and we were kind of tired of missing their events. And so she just thought, that's what she's going to do. I kind of kept pulling her back in at times to help.
You hear that, Jennifer? See,
Yeah.
Tom did it to his wife
Yeah,
too.
and she would come in and help, but not on a daily basis.
Yeah.
She didn't do that on a daily basis. And then I just didn't like coaching without her. It just wasn't as much fun for me. And but we had a new little group of kids that were quite good. And then her father in 2005 was tragically killed in a racing car accident, which is another story. And so I ended up, I had to do some things for the family. And so I went to our coaches and said, listen, you're going to take my elite group and I got to manage these things. And so they were excited to take the group on. They did a great job with them. And I decided, I think I'm done with the day-to-day coaching. And I just want to support my coaches and give them the resources that they need to continue to keep this thing going at Ariels. And so that's what I did.
And it led you into a phase in your life where you said, hey, what I would like to do maybe is teach some teachers. You and Neil did boot camp
Yep.
and you did some national team bar staff stuff and things like that, right?
Yeah, I love the sport and I love teaching. And so, I was helping clubs with their business. I was helping coaches with their coaching, and I loved it. I just love it.
So I have a very similar story on a lower level here, but in 2013, actually before that, my wife used to say that she would coach until the day she died, that she was going to be 88 years old with Coke bottle glasses and then one day keel over while coaching beam. The whole while I kept asking her, hey, do you want to be a stay-at-home mom? do you want to get out? Because we had the resources at the gym to be able to
Mhm.
do this and whatever. And in 2013, my daughter was done with gymnastics and had started a volleyball career. And we had to pay uh, essentially a babysitter to attend a parent meeting for volleyball and take notes.
Wow.
And that was the straw that broke my wife's back and said, I want to be mom.
Mm.
And what she said is, I want to be mom for the next 6 months. And said, but I'm coming back. And a week into it, she said, no, I was born for this. I was born to be our kids' moms and whatever. And so I stuck with it for a few years. Part of it was out of necessity. That I didn't have coaches behind me that could do these things because I didn't anticipate that this was going to happen. I'm a
Mhm.
big planner, and I stuck with it for a few years. And like you, I started to lose my fire because she's not just my wife but she's just sincerely my partner, right? We used to dream and scheme about kids and meets and teams and things at the gym, and all of a sudden she was less interested in these dreams and schemes, and it made me realize, yeah, I'm less interested too.
Mm.
And so in like 2017, I think, I retired. And I retired for 5 whole weeks, and 3 weeks was a lot of fun. I played golf and fished and
Mm.
had a good time. And by 3 weeks and a day, I was like, "Ugh, I don't like this."
Mm.
In fact, I started to go into some depression because I didn't like the man I was. I didn't have any goals. I didn't have any direction, any drive, and I felt like I was withering.
Mm.
And so I came up with this harebrained idea to start this company called Iron Business Solutions. Proverbs 27:17 says, as iron sharpens iron,
Iron
so one
sharpens
man
iron.
sharpens another. And I thought, hey, I'm 45 years old at this time and in a place to retire with my 2 gyms and earn quite frankly, a very nice living. I, I think I can help other people do this. So it started out, we were going to be just a consulting
Mhm.
company, and new things came out of it, new opportunities, which included mentorship programs, which Mary Lee has joined. And now, Tom, welcome. I'm happy
Thank
to
you.
announce to everybody that Tom Forster has joined the mentorship program where he will serve as either business mentor, because I said at the beginning of the podcast, you're known in the gymnastics industry as much for your business acumen as you are your coaching acumen.
That's a nice
And
compliment. Thanks.
also true. And so I said, hey, we've got these packages where somebody can purchase a team mentor to help them with their girls' team, 26 one-on-one sessions, 1 hour every other week for
Mm.
a year. And we also have a business thing. And we have this huge, we call it the platinum package, where they can sign up for both and get a discount. And they literally could choose Tom Forster for both of those that they wanted. So, Tom, tell us about your excitement level, your intentions, your whatever in joining this program.
Well, the beauty of it for me is it allows me still a creative outlet that I just love passing forward the things that I've learned to hopefully help business owners and coaches avoid the pitfalls and the mistakes that I made,
Mm,
to make the whole industry just more a positive experience and better. It's a really great industry to be part of, and it's
amen.
also sport at the same time. So it's more than just business. It's
Yeah.
and through sport and through movement, you can really impact a child's identity. Their self esteem and how they feel significant. And
Well, I
so
told
to
in the
be part
first
of that, I
episode
love
that
it.
gymnastics changed my identity and maybe saved my life because I was on a path that was not good.
Mm.
And when people began to know me as Kenny the gymnast instead of Kenny the bad kid, my life took a positive
Yeah,
turn. I started getting good grades. I started behaving,
yeah.
and here I am. So you already have helped many gyms across the country and helped many coaches across the country. So when you've been helping, let's say in the business world,
Uh-huh.
these coaches, is there a one maybe or two common obstacles that you see?
Well, the biggest challenge that we all seem to have is training staff.
Yeah.
Making sure that the teachers know what to teach, how to teach it safely, and then another challenge is making it fun.
Mm.
You know, if it's not fun, I really believe in a sport that's an individual sport like ours, where you don't have, there's no one to pass the ball to, right? There's no one else. It's you.
Yep.
In fact,
And no one's playing defense.
and you're the
It's
ball.
100% you.
The
Yeah.
thing bouncing around is you. So in that, when it's not fun or it becomes boring, you quit.
Mm.
And so creating a curriculum that tries to inspire kids with fun and yet still challenging without berating or without, you can even do it without competition. There's challenges you can create. I love that challenge, and
Mm.
I love teaching people how to do that, because that's really what the crux is. And it can, I don't want to say backing up, but I remember having this discussion with Carrie Perry and Lily, USA Gymnastics, saying, listen, every Olympian has two things in common. They all started in a class
Mm.
and they all had a coach.
Yeah.
So you have clubs. The phone, does it ring a lot during the week for students to sign up?
I mean, a reasonable amount, but
So
yeah.
how many times does it ring during the month for a new staff person that wants a job?
Yeah, not near as much.
What about an advanced coach?
Even less
Almost
often.
never,
Yep.
right? So in that scenario, who do you think is our greatest asset? The coaches. Because
Yeah.
without a coach, you can't
Staff.
have a class.
Yeah.
And without a gymnastics club, you can't offer a class,
So
right? So the key is you got to have a staff that knows what they're doing, enjoys what they're doing.
and because you've had 5 clubs at one time with 87 staff members, you guys developed some really cool systems in place for training, for
Mhm.
hiring. You learned some lessons. Some you learned,
The hard way.
yep, the hard way, and some you stumbled upon without having to go the hard way.
Yeah.
And in your years, again, people, this is since 1983. So we're 41 years
41 years.
into you being a business owner, 41 years worth of wisdom that people can take advantage of. I always tell a story that when people ask, hey, what does Iron Business do? And it does so many things. But I always say, what I've learned is that very few people open a restaurant because they want to get rich. What happens is you have somebody who's an excellent chef and he cooks up a steak and everybody's always telling him, this is the most delicious steak I've ever had. You need to open a restaurant. And the guy's passionate about cooking, right? So he goes and he opens a restaurant and he serves killer meals, but he doesn't know a lick about business. He doesn't know about payroll, about hiring, about taxes, about inventory. And 4 months into it, he's in over his head and upside down on his equipment and whatever. And 2 months after that, they're out of business.
Yeah.
And what I think I specialize in, and you as well, this is why you're here, is we understand and relate to the chef,
Yeah.
right? Because you and I we're just as passionate about the coaching in the beginning. And through trial and error and through some research and development, we've gone through it and come out the other side without having to fold. And we've learned a bunch of lessons that we want the chef, hey, listen, you can keep cooking that great steak. We've got some systems that if you put these systems in place, you don't have to be great at taxes and
Right.
payroll and these other things.
Right.
These systems will be great for you. And we want to share that
Yeah.
with people.
And it's fun.
Yeah.
It's super fun to do and to help people. I love it.
But I think other clubs succeeding the way ETC does, even here in Middle Tennessee, is not a threat to me. It's a blessing.
It's good for everybody.
It is, because the more kids that are taking
Mhm.
gymnastics means there'll be more kids taking gymnastics.
Mhm.
Everybody's clubs
Yeah.
do better when one person's club does better. All right.
Yes.
So, how can the viewer get some help with their team program or with their business? Well, they can reach out to Iron Business Solutions on social media, or our website, which is currently undergoing a reconstruction. I anticipate that the week that this launches, it'll be up and running. Or they can reach me by email, Ken Harris, ironbusiness@gmail.com. And we can get them going on some really cool packages we have right now at tremendously discounted prices. When Mary Lee was here, I said, hey, we would continue to honor 2023 and actually the 2023 discounted prices from Congresses. And I'm going to
Mm,
continue to honor those all the way until I start speaking at the 2024 Congresses, and we'll have our new prices. So anybody who gets in touch with us can take advantage of the discounted prices from 2023. So right now, that will literally save you thousands. Tom, two last things, and then we'll wrap this up. This will be a couple of quick minutes here. I promised the people on social media
yeah.
that we would have an Ask the Expert segment. So
Okay.
there were a lot of questions for me to
Really?
filter. Yes, for me to filter through. And just like I didn't want you to have to spot 12-year-olds on KIPS, I didn't want you to have to answer questions about, hey, how do I get my 12-year-old to extend or glide for a KIPS? So I picked a few of these. The first one is, with all of the changes in the sport and the cultural shift, what do you think is essential for a coach in order to be an effective coach with this new generation of athletes?
Most importantly, you have to know what are the goals of your athlete. Because your job as a coach is not that they meet your expectations, but that you meet theirs. So you have to know what are their goals. And then, of course, in our sport, every level, USA Gym is very organized. So every level has event requirements. And you start there. If you want to be a level 5, well, what are the event requirements? You gotta meet those, et cetera. Through the levels. So you have to know the goals, and then the higher up you go, it gets a little scarier, it gets a little more difficult, but it also gets more fun. I mean,
Yeah.
the skills get fun and exciting, and so making sure the athletes' goals align appropriately for their ability level, and then your job is try to help them achieve that.
Okay, so this next question is a perfect follow up, but I want you to answer two ways, okay? The question is, what do you think the most important quality a coach in your program should possess? And here's how I want you to answer this. First, I want you to answer this, step back into your role as national team coordinator. So, what
Mhm.
is the most important quality for a coach that's coming into the national team? And then I want you to answer, because you guys also own a rec only gym.
Mhm.
So I want you to answer, what's the most important quality for a coach who applies there?
For the team coach, um, the most important quality, I think, is empathy,
Mm.
understanding the challenges that these athletes are going to go through,
What an answer. I did not expect that, but holy cow, what a great answer.
because our sport's one of the very few, if you think about that, if you're a basketball player, for example, the more you play, the better you get. You get some height, you get better. Does the sport get more difficult? No.
No.
You learn to dribble, you learn to pass, you learn to shoot, you learn to lay up, you learn whatever. So the longer you play, the game actually gets easier. Now your competition gets tougher,
Yeah.
but it's easier for you. And our sport's not that. So as they improve, we ask them, can you now do it in a pike? Oh, can you add a half twist? And so the better they get, the sport gets more difficult and more difficult. And don't lose sight of that.
Wow. Wow. Okay. And so the number one quality for somebody that wants to apply for a job at your rec gym.
I believe that parents are enrolling their kids in gymnastics not to become Olympians. They want them to have fun. They want them to learn. They want them to not sit on the couch. And I believe, it's my experience over 41 years, that quite often their hour at our gym might be their best hour of the week. That they may have a home life that is not great, and we are the positive part of their week. And don't lose sight of that. And you just don't know what's going on in the lives of these children in your classes, but you've got them now for 45 minutes or 55 minutes or whatever it is. And your job is to make sure they leave happy, motivated, and feel valued.
What a spot on, in my opinion, answer. We're old enough. We remember a television show called Cheers,
Yeah.
right? And I use this example at my gym all the time. In fact, at the last leadership team meeting for ETC last week, I reminded people Jesus tells us, what credit is it to you to love those that love you back?
Right.
So I like to talk to my staff about loving the unlovables. That in that television show, Cheers, what happened when Norm walked into the bar? The whole bar stopped and everybody went, Norm, like
Yeah.
he was a celebrity. And what I say is, I want the kid who only gets 1 good hour a week, who has to sit alone at the lunch table, who isn't good at sports, isn't pretty, isn't smart, to feel like Norm from Cheers at ETC.
Mm.
That when that kid comes in the door, we're all going, Norm, so glad you're here today. Have a great time. Because little Susie Pretty Pants over there has tons of friends, is good at gymnastics, and it's fine. Let's celebrate her and have a good time too. But you find that kid that you know is eating alone by himself, and you give him that 1 hour. That 1 hour during the week that he has where he feels like he's somebody, or
Special.
she feels
Yeah.
like she's important.
Yeah.
And you make it happen. And I think you answered in the same way. All right. I'm going to skip over the time machine questions because we're so pressed for time here. When Mary Lee was here, she recommended a book, and it was Atomic Habits. And I
Atomic
literally
Habits, yeah.
just finished that
Oh, yeah?
today. Awesome book. I'm glad she recommended it. And I totally understand why she loved the book, because if ever there was a book that was written basically about Mary Lee Tracy, there it is. So, Tom, do you have a book recommendation?
I have 2.
Okay, let's go.
Start with Why by Simon Sinek.
Start with Why
Start
by
with Why.
Simon Sinek. Okay,
Sinek.
quick premise.
Yep. You can go on YouTube and find Simon Sinek. A lot of things he said. I really encourage viewers, go do that. He has a lot to say. He's a positive, motivational guy.
Okay.
Great logic. And his premise was, Microsoft, for example, said, what do we have to do? Well, we've got to make a computer that, can do such and such. Apple came along and said, well, why are we doing that?
Yeah.
Why we want to be creative. We want to do right. And there was a very different. Now they're both successful, but we look at both companies very differently, don't we?
Yes.
And if you've ever flown Southwest Airlines, for example, and some others, their why is very different.
Yeah.
And as a consumer, you feel it.
Yeah.
And so he talks about that and how you do that. And you start with why.
Wow.
And then the other one I liked is The Talent Code by Daniel Coyle. And he talks about how talent isn't born, you create it. It's very, very interesting book for coaches. And I read it through when I was the coordinator. I read a bunch of books, trying to learn more about leadership and the culture and what do we want to do. But yeah, I like
Most
those
of them
2
were
books.
illustrated.
Yeah, mostly cartoon books.
Well, I actually brought 2 books to recommend as well, but they're related so people understand. First, I think everyone should read The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman. It will change your life relationally once you understand that you're speaking a language to somebody that they also don't speak. And then he wrote a follow-up to it with a business partner called The 5 Appreciation Languages in the Workplace.
In the workplace.
Yeah. And I actually paid one of my staff to get certified as a certifier of this thing so that they can give the tests and whatever that are in the book, and then had them give the tests to my leadership team so that I could understand, how do I better relate to the people that I lead? What are the appreciation languages that they speak? Have you read either one of those books?
No, but I know all about the 5 love languages.
Do you have any idea which love language is yours?
Oh, yeah, I know mine.
What is it?
Yeah, physical touch and words of affirmation.
Oh, wow. Okay, so for me, when I took the test, it's quality time up here, and everything else was way down here. And my wife laughs because she likes words of affirmation, and she says, I realize why you don't need words of affirmation, because you're constantly telling yourself how good you are, so nobody else has to do it. So anyway, it's a perfect way for us to wrap up. Thank you, Tom, for being a
Thank
wonderful
you.
guest and role model. Sincerely, I mean that for future generations
you.
of coaches and athletes, and coming all the way from Colorado. As usual, you can find me on social media. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. My email is kenharrisironbusiness@gmail.com. Until the next episode of Stick the Landing podcast, brought to you by Iron Business Solutions, I'm Ken Harris of Iron Business Solutions, and we'll have stories to tell and solutions to deliver for your business. Hey, if you enjoy this podcast, please be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to all of our social media and leave us a review. Links in the description.